The Shaw family mansion always felt colder on meeting days. Maybe it was the marble floors, or the way voices echoed off high ceilings, or just the icy stares from relatives who saw me as nothing more than a disappointment. Today was especially frigid. I adjusted my simple black dress, a stark contrast to my cousin's designer labels, and took my usual seat at the massive oak table. Last row, far corner. The designated spot for the family's problem child. Olivia. Aunt Margaret's voice dripped with false concern. So glad you could join us. I nodded politely, watching as the room filled with the Shaw family hierarchy. Uncle Robert, the self-appointed patriarch since my father's death. His wife Margaret, forever playing the concerned aunt while wielding gossip like a weapon. Their children, James and Catherine, groomed from birth to take over the family business. And of course, my mother, Victoria Shaw, who'd spent the last 15 years trying to erase any trace of my father from my personality. Now that everyone's here, Uncle Robert began, standing at the head of the table. We need to discuss some concerning matters. I knew what was coming. I'd overheard the whispers, seen the worried glances, noticed how they'd been monitoring my movements more closely lately. Olivia, he turned to me, his voice carrying that particular tone reserved for difficult children. We've been reviewing your recent activities. Of course they had. The Shaw family specialty. Surveillance disguised as care. Your spending patterns are concerning, he continued. Multiple large transfers, substantial stock purchases, property investments in areas we don't approve of. I kept my face neutral, even as I felt my pulse quicken. They've been watching my accounts. Probably had someone at the bank feeding them information. Classic Shaw tactics. We're worried about you, dear, Aunt Margaret chimed in. These risky investments, these questionable business decisions, it's not appropriate for someone of your limited experience. Catherine, my cousin, barely concealed her smirk. We just want to protect you from yourself. Live. Protect me. The same excuse they'd used when they tried to stop me from going to business school. When they blocked my attempt to work at a competing firm. When they insisted I take a safe position in their company's HR department. The family has decided, Uncle Robert declared, that it's best to put you on a monthly allowance. A reasonable sum, of course. But all major financial decisions will need to be approved by the family council. I'm 28 years old, I said quietly. I don't need an allowance. Don't be difficult, Olivia, my mother snapped. This is for your own good. You're too much like your father, always chasing wild schemes, never thinking things through. The mention of my father sent a familiar ache through my chest. Alexander Shaw, the black sheep who dared to challenge the family's conservative investment approach. Who'd seen opportunities where they saw risks, who'd died in a car accident when I was 13, leaving me alone in this pit of vipers. Your father's reckless decisions almost bankrupted this family, Uncle Robert reminded me. We won't let history repeat itself. I opened my laptop slowly, deliberately. Before you make any decisions about my financial capabilities, maybe you should look at something. Olivia, my mother warned, but I was already turning the screen around. The first page showed a simple investment portfolio. Blue chip stocks, conservative bonds, exactly what they'd expect. But as I clicked through to the next screen, the room temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Private equity holdings, venture capital investments, and most importantly, a substantial block of shares in Shaw Industries, purchased quietly through a series of shell companies over the past 5 years. What is this? Uncle Robert's voice had lost its condescending edge. My portfolio, I said calmly. The one you apparently missed while you were so busy monitoring my visible accounts. James leaned forward, his face paling as he recognized some of the companies listed. These are our major suppliers. I confirmed. And your technology partners. And your biggest distribution channels. I clicked to the next page. Oh, and this one might interest you, Uncle Robert. Remember that mysterious investor who's been buying up Shaw Industries stock through Goldman Sachs? The color drained from his face. That's impossible. We had our people check every buyer. Your people checked what I wanted them to see. I closed the laptop gently. My father taught me more than just wild schemes before he died. He taught me how to play the long game. You're lying, Catherine accused, but her voice shook slightly. There's no way you could have accumulated that much capital. I smiled, reaching into my bag for a folder I'd prepared. Remember that failing startup I invested in 3 years ago? The one you all mocked me for supporting? I slid the folder across the table. They were just acquired by Microsoft. For $8 billion. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother had gone completely still, her perfect posture frozen in shock. Aunt Margaret's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I've spent the last 5 years building something, I continued, my voice steady. While you were all busy watching my decoy accounts, criticizing my questionable decisions, and planning to put me on an allowance, I was becoming your largest individual shareholder. Uncle Robert's hands were shaking as he flipped through the documents. Why? He managed finally. Why go through all this deception? I stood up, smoothing my simple dress. Because you never would have let me do it openly. Because you were so convinced I was stupid, reckless, incapable, just like you thought my father was, that you never bothered to look deeper. The board meeting, James suddenly said, realization dawning on his face. Next week. The vote on the new direction for the company. Yes, I confirmed. Interesting timing for this family meeting, isn't it? Trying to restrict my financial control just days before a major board vote. Uncle Robert took a step toward me, his face reddening. Now listen here, young lady. No, I cut him off. You listen. For 15 years, I've watched you run this company exactly the way you've run this family, through control, manipulation, and fear. That ends now. I picked up my laptop and turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and about that allowance? I think we can table that discussion. I have a board meeting to prepare for. The last thing I heard as I walked out was Catherine's voice, barely a whisper. Dad, what just happened? I smiled as I stepped into the elevator. They had no idea that this was just the beginning. Monday's board meeting would bring revelations that would make today look like a minor family squabble. But for now, I had work to do. My father's legacy, and my own, depended on what happened next. In my car, I pulled out my phone and dialed a familiar number. Michael? Yes. Everything went according to plan. Start contacting the other shareholders. It's time for phase 2. The Shaw family had always underestimated me. On Monday, they'd learn exactly how expensive that mistake was going to be. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation and strategic calls. By Sunday night, my phone had logged over 50 missed calls from various family members, each one more desperate than the last. Olivia, darling, let's discuss this like adults. Aunt Margaret, you're making a terrible mistake. Mother, this isn't what your father would have wanted. Uncle Robert, that last one made me laugh. They'd spent 15 years telling me my father was a failure. And now they wanted to use his memory as leverage Too late. I sat in my home office, reviewing the documents one final time. The modern penthouse, purchased through one of my holding companies, offered a perfect view of the Shaw Industries headquarters. The same building where tomorrow, everything would change. A soft knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. "Come in, Sarah." My assistant entered, carrying a stack of folders. "Final confirmation from all the major shareholders. They'll support your motion tomorrow." I nodded, taking the folders. "And the press? On standby. The moment the vote is confirmed, they'll run the story." "Perfect." I stood, walking to the window. "Any word from Michael?" Sarah checked her tablet. "Yes, the auditors finished their review. Everything's documented, just as you suspected." I smiled. Uncle Robert had always been arrogant, but his arrogance had made him careless. The audit had uncovered exactly what I'd hoped it would: years of questionable transactions, nepotistic deals, and buried financial misconduct. My phone buzzed again. James this time. I answered, putting it on speaker. "Olivia, please," he started, his voice uncharacteristically humble. "We can work something out." "Can we, cousin?" "Like when you worked out having me removed from the executive training program." He faltered. "That was years ago. We were kids." "No, James. You were kids playing with your inheritance. I was building my own legacy." "The board meeting tomorrow." He hesitated. "What exactly are you planning?" "Guess you'll have to show up and find out." I ended the call and turned to Sarah. "Everything ready for tomorrow?" She nodded. "Car will pick you up at 8 a.m. Security team's been briefed. All documents are prepared." "Good. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be interesting." After she left, I opened my safe and pulled out an old, worn leather journal, my father's business diary. I found it hidden in his study after the accident, protected from the family's thorough cleaning of his belongings. Inside were detailed notes about every corrupt deal, every manipulated contract, every instance of Uncle Robert's mismanagement. But more importantly, it contained my father's true vision for Shaw Industries: innovative, ethical, forward-thinking. Everything the current leadership feared. "Watch me, Dad," I whispered, touching the worn pages. "Watch me finish what you started." Monday morning arrived clear and cold. I dressed carefully: charcoal gray suit, pearl earrings that had belonged to my grandmother, before the family had tried to deny me that inheritance too. Hair pulled back, severe and professional. The lobby of Shaw Industries was buzzing when I arrived. Board members, shareholders, and executives all trying to look busy while stealing glances at me. News had spread fast. "Olivia." Uncle Robert's voice boomed across the marble floor. "A word before the meeting?" I turned, facing him with a calm smile. "Sorry, Uncle. All communication should go through my legal team now." His face reddened. "This is family." "No," I cut him off. "This is business. You taught me that, remember? When you blocked my promotion? When you told everyone I was too emotional to handle client accounts?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Whatever you're planning, think carefully. You could destroy everything we've built." "You mean everything you've stolen?" I matched his quiet tone. "Everything you've manipulated and corrupted since my father died." Before he could respond, the elevator opened, and Michael Anderson stepped out, my father's old friend, and now my closest ally in the business world. "Olivia," Michael called out warmly. "Ready for today?" Uncle Robert's face went pale. Michael was not only a respected industry figure, but also the head of the regulatory committee that oversaw family-owned corporations. More than ready, I replied, watching Uncle Robert retreat hastily. The boardroom filled quickly. I took my seat, not in my usual corner, but at the head of the table, the position of power I'd earned through years of patient strategy. Before we begin, Uncle Robert started, trying to maintain control. I think we should address the recent developments in family dynamics. Actually, I'd interrupted smoothly. We should follow the agenda. First item: leadership review and vote of confidence. I nodded to Sarah, who began distributing thick folders to each board member. What is this? Aunt Margaret demanded, flipping through the pages. A comprehensive audit of Shaw Industries management over the past 15 years. I replied. Pay special attention to pages 47 through 52. The evidence of financial misconduct is particularly interesting. The room erupted in whispers as people began reading. Uncle Robert's face went from red to white to gray in the span of seconds. This is a mistake, he stammered. These transactions were all approved. By you, I finished. Using your position as trustee after my father's death, including the systematic devaluation of his shares that should have been held in trust for me. James stood up, panic clear on his face. We can explain. Sit down, cousin, I said quietly. The time for explanations is over. Now it's time for changes. I stood, commanding the room's attention. As the majority shareholder of Shaw Industries, I call for an immediate vote on the current leadership. The next hour was chaos. Votes were cast. Accusations flew. Uncle Robert tried to challenge the legality of my share ownership, only to be shut down by both legal teams. In the end, the numbers were clear. 76% in favor of removal. Uncle Robert, Aunt Margaret, and their entire leadership team gone. Effective immediately. As security began escorting them out, my mother finally spoke up. What happens now? I turned to her, seeing fear in her eyes for the first time. Now? Now we rebuild, the way Dad always wanted. The press release went out within the hour. Shaw Industries announces major leadership change. Olivia Shaw takes control in historic board vote. By evening, I sat alone in what had been Uncle Robert's office, looking out over the city. The same view he'd had while plotting to keep me powerless. The irony wasn't lost on me. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Your mother's downstairs. Should I send her up? I thought for a moment. Yes, it's time for another family meeting. Mother walked into the office like she was entering enemy territory, cautious, defensive, her designer handbag clutched like a shield. For a moment, looking at her perfectly coiffed hair and manicured appearance, I saw myself at 13, desperate for her approval, confused by her coldness after Dad's death. The prodigal daughter, she said, attempting sarcasm, but failing to hide her uncertainty. Satisfied with today's coup, I gestured to the chair across from me. Sit down, Mom. We need to talk. She perched on the edge of the seat, as if afraid to get too comfortable. I suppose you'll be removing me from the board as well. That depends, I replied, opening my laptop, on whether you're ready to hear the truth about Dad's death. Her perfectly composed face cracked slightly. What are you talking about? I turned the screen toward her. These are Dad's original business records, the ones Uncle Robert claimed were lost in the accident. Interesting how they showed up in his private safe, isn't it? Mother's hands began to shake. You've been in Robert's private files. I've been everywhere, Mom. In every account, every hidden folder, every secret meeting minute. I know exactly what happened 15 years ago. The color drained from her face as I continued. Dad wasn't being reckless with company money. He discovered Uncle Robert's embezzlement scheme. The accident happened the day before he was planning to take evidence to the board. "No," she whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice. "Yes," I said firmly. "And you knew. Maybe not everything, but you knew something wasn't right. That's why you let them push me aside, minimize me, try to keep me from asking too many questions." Tears began to slip down her cheeks, ruining her perfect makeup. "They said they were protecting the family name." "They were protecting themselves," I corrected. "And you helped them, all while treating Dad's memory like something shameful." She stood abruptly, pacing the office. "What do you want from me, Olivia? An apology? Confession? It's been 15 years. I want the truth. For once in your life, just tell me the truth." She stopped at the window, staring out at the darkening sky. "Robert, he told me Alexander was going to destroy everything, that his investigation would bankrupt us all. I was scared. When the accident happened," she trailed off. "When the accident happened, you chose sides." I finished. "You chose them over Dad's memory, over me." "I chose survival," she snapped, turning to face me. "I was 39 with a teenage daughter and no real power in this family." "What would you have done?" I stood slowly, walking to stand in front of her. "I would have fought, like I've been fighting for the past 15 years, like Dad taught me to." Silence fell between us, heavy with years of unspoken pain. "The investigators will want to talk to you," I said finally. "About what you knew when you knew it." She nodded, suddenly looking old. "And if I cooperate? Then you can keep your board seat, under supervision, but your days of blind loyalty to Uncle Robert are over." As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A news alert. "Shaw Industries scandal deepens. Former leadership under criminal investigation." "It's really over, isn't it?" Mother asked, reading the headline over my shoulder. "Their version is over," I corrected. "Mine's just beginning." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of change. The criminal investigation into Uncle Robert and his associates expanded. James and Catherine fled to Europe, their assets frozen. Aunt Margaret had a very public breakdown at the country club. But more importantly, Shaw Industries began to transform. I implemented the innovative strategies my father had outlined in his journal, opened up leadership positions based on merit rather than family connections, established an ethics committee with real power. The market responded enthusiastically. Our stocks soared. New partnerships formed. The press dubbed it the Shaw Renaissance. 1 month after the takeover, I sat in my office reviewing quarterly reports when Sarah announced an unexpected visitor. "Send them in," I said, not looking up from my work. "Hello, Olivia." I froze at the familiar voice. Uncle Robert. Looking decades older, his confident swagger replaced by defeated slump. "You're not supposed to be here," I said calmly, pressing the security button under my desk. "I needed to see you, to understand." He gestured vaguely at the office at me. How did we not see it? I leaned back, studying him. "You saw what you wanted to see. A quiet girl who wouldn't cause trouble. A convenient scapegoat for your schemes. Your father," he started, then stopped. "Alexander would be proud." "Don't," I cut him off sharply. "Don't you dare speak about my father." Security arrived, ready to escort him out. "One last thing," he said as they took his arms. Was it worth it? Destroying your family for revenge? I stood, walking to face him. This wasn't about revenge, Uncle Robert. This was about justice. For Dad. For every person you've crushed under your power games. The family destroyed itself. I just exposed the rot. After he was gone, I opened my father's journal again, turning to the last entry he'd written before his death. To my dearest Olivia, never let them make you doubt yourself. True power isn't in controlling others. It's in staying true to your principles. They may call you weak now, but someday you'll show them what real strength looks like. I believe in you always. Tears blurred my vision as I traced his handwriting. We did it, Dad, I whispered. We finally did it. My phone buzzed. A text from Mother. Dinner tonight? Just us? I hesitated, then replied, Yes, we have a lot to talk about. Looking out over the city, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in 15 years. The Shaw family would never be the same. But maybe that was exactly what it needed. The quarterly board meeting was scheduled for tomorrow. The agenda included finalizing the company's new direction, appointing a fresh leadership team, and establishing the Alexander Shaw Foundation for Business Ethics. They'd called me stupid, incapable, too weak to handle money. Now they called me CEO. But more importantly, I could finally call myself my father's daughter, proudly, openly, without shame or doubt. And that was worth more than all the Shaw family millions combined.
I never meant to invite you. We don't want you here. That's what my only brother said. My only brother's wedding. The once-in-a-lifetime family event. And I learned I was excluded. My name is Samantha. For some reason, I was often the only one left out of family gatherings. I always gave them the benefit of the doubt. They probably just forgot, I'd tell myself. It's nothing personal. I held on to that thought for far too long. Maybe part of me believed that if I just stayed useful and kind, they'd eventually notice me again. Last year, they skipped my birthday dinner entirely. All I got was a short text from my mother. Happy birthday, Samantha. No emoji. No warmth. Only Aunt Hillary was on my side. She'd call sometimes and ask the one thing no one else did. Don't you feel lonely? She was the only one who seemed proud when I left home and built my own career. The rest of the family dismissed my job in digital marketing as just messing with computers. They had no idea I have been financially successful. I never bragged, and they never asked. So when an invitation to Thomas's wedding arrived last month, I couldn't believe it. Printed on thick cardstock in gold lettering, it read, You are cordially invited to the wedding of Thomas Anderson and Lucy Gale. The date was May 15th, set in an upscale garden in the city, with a reception to follow at a lakeside resort. My hands trembled with excitement. I thought this was a sign. I spent weeks picking out a breathtaking dress and the perfect gift. I booked a hair appointment. Got my nails done. For years, I'd only wanted one thing: to be acknowledged, to be useful, to be needed. And finally, I thought that moment had come. I believed this invitation would thaw the ice between me and my family. That I would finally be welcomed. That I would finally be seen. I had no idea how wrong I was. The day before the wedding, I drove to Aunt Hillary's house, my heart light. I wanted to show her the surprise gift I planned to give my brother at the wedding. When I arrived, she seemed slightly startled but welcomed me warmly as always. "I can't wait for tomorrow," I said, hugging her with excitement. But there was a trace of sadness in her eyes, a hint of guilt. "How have you been, Samantha? Would you like some coffee?" she asked, and led me to the living room, and I could hear the tension in her voice. On the coffee table was an unfamiliar photo album. While she was in the kitchen preparing coffee, I opened it without thinking. Inside were familiar faces, my entire family smiling in a beautiful garden. "Aunt Hillary, what's this from?" I asked as she came back with a coffee tray. I noticed her hands were trembling slightly. "Oh, Thomas's wedding. Last weekend," she faltered. "Samantha, I wanted to tell you. I tried to call, but I couldn't find the courage." My heart stopped. "The wedding?" She sat beside me and took my hand. "You thought it was tomorrow, didn't you?" I couldn't believe what they did either, giving you the wrong date on purpose. I protested. "I told Thomas and your parents this was cruel." My voice trembled. "But I got the invitation. I've been preparing." Anger flared in Hillary's eyes. "They excluded you intentionally. I almost didn't go because of it. But in the end, I went. And thinking of you, I feel so deeply sorry." I picked up the album again and flipped through the pages. Everyone was there. A gorgeous garden ceremony, fairy lights, champagne glasses, everyone dressed to the nines. Even distant relatives I hadn't seen in years were there. There were vows, speeches, dancing, and group photos. This wasn't some small private event. This was a real wedding. My only brother's wedding. A once-in-a-lifetime family event. My face burned and my mouth went dry like desert sand. "I need to confirm this," I said, standing up. Hillary held my hand tightly. "Samantha, wait. Before you confront them, just know you're strong. You always have been. But this was cruel. You shouldn't go alone. I'll come with you." I took a deep breath. "Thank you, Aunt Hillary. But this is something I have to do myself." She nodded. "All right. But whatever happens, I'm always on your side. I always have been. I always will be." Empowered by her words, I got in my car and drove toward my parents' cottage. My mind was spinning and my heart was in chaos. Without Aunt Hillary's steady support, I don't think I could have been this strong. She was the only one who ever acknowledged how isolated I'd been in the family. The only one who sometimes raised her voice against it. When I arrived at the cottage, I saw not only my parents' car, but also a familiar black SUV in the driveway. It was Thomas's car. My hands trembled as I opened the door. Laughter drifted from the living room. There they were, my parents, my brother Thomas, and Lucy, clearly the bride, though now dressed casually instead of in white. They were laughing over a set of photos. Wedding photos. The moment I walked in, the conversation stopped. Everyone turned to look at me. For a moment, the room froze in silence. "Samantha?" My mother looked startled. "What are you doing here?" "I went to Aunt Hillary's," I said, though my voice didn't sound like mine. "She told me the wedding was last weekend." I didn't miss the glance exchanged between Thomas and Lucy. Lucy's lips pressed into a thin line. "Oh yes," my mother said, her eyes dodging mine. It was a beautiful little ceremony. Little? I thought of the album. There were over 50 people there. And I got an invitation for a ceremony happening tomorrow. That's right, Thomas suddenly said, sounding tired. Because we never intended to invite you. The air changed. No one stopped him. We didn't want you ruining our wedding, he said, looking right at me. You're always quiet, always in the background, but somehow things go wrong around you. People don't know how to act when you're there. I wanted one perfect day in my life, and that meant without you. A sharp pain pierced my chest. Every strange look, every feeling of exclusion I'd brushed aside. They all crystallized in that moment. You felt this way for a long time? I asked. All of us have. My mother added quietly, but her words were clear. To be honest, Samantha, you've always been extra. Like a ghost that leaves no trace, but still needs looking after at family events. We just... Samantha, they don't mean it like that, my father cut in, rushing. We just wanted to keep the wedding small. My mother spoke over him, calm and cold. You're disrupting the peace we've spent years building in this family. Peace? I stared at her in disbelief. By ignoring me? By cutting me out? Thomas sighed. Let's end this conversation. We tried to avoid this. This is exactly why we didn't invite her, he said, looking at my parents as if I wasn't even there. Take the hint, he said, cold and clear. We don't want you. Time seemed to stop. No one moved. I see, I finally said. I turned on my heel and walked out of the house. Before getting into the car, I called Aunt Hillary. Thank you, Auntie, for always being in my corner. Always, Samantha, she replied softly. You are my family, and family isn't about blood. It's built on love and respect. Her words echoed in me. They gave me the strength to decide what to do next. On the drive home, I couldn't stop hearing Thomas's words. Take the hint. I replayed them over and over. Like I was some oblivious intruder who refused to get the message. Despite all the signs that had been there for years. Like believing I still had a place in their lives was some sort of burden. Hot tears ran down my face as I gripped the steering wheel. It wasn't missing the wedding that broke me. It was the crushing clarity. The undeniable confirmation that I wasn't part of them anymore. That I wasn't wanted. But here's what matters most. I'm not someone who seeks revenge. I don't cling to small grievances. I don't want to hurt anyone. What I wanted, what I needed, was to finally let go. No more hope. No more showing up with a smile. No more offering kindness like a bargaining chip, hoping for a seat at their table. That night, I started planning. Not revenge, something more lasting. Something they would never expect. Because they never cared to know the real me. The first step was financial. The truth is, I have done well these past few years. I worked in digital marketing, not a billionaire, but very comfortable. Especially since branching into property management, I'd made some excellent investments. No one ever asked about my life, so they didn't know I now owned 3 rental properties. They didn't know I had been quietly covering my parents' expenses through anonymous grants from my LLC. the roof repairs, the plumbing issues, even the property taxes. I never needed recognition. I just wanted to support them because they were my parents. The next day, I contacted Susan Wang, my attorney. She's the sharp woman who handles my real estate investments. Once I explained the situation, she sprang into action. "They've been emotionally abusing you for years," she said, jotting notes down. "And now, despite being financially dependent on you, this is how they treat you." "That's right," I said. "I don't think they even realize how much I've supported their lives. But honestly, I don't want to keep doing it. I need to protect myself." Susan nodded. "We can file for a restraining order. If there's evidence of emotional abuse and harassment, the court will likely grant it." Over the next few days, I gathered everything. Records of ignored invitations, screenshots from group chats, the wedding photos, and the most damning piece, the invitation to a wedding that had already happened a week before. A month later, the court approved a temporary restraining order. With Susan's help, I served legal documents to every family member. It prohibited them from coming near me physically and restricted all online contact. And one more thing. I signed papers formally ending my financial assistance for their home repairs. I froze the account. The first call came from my mother. "Samantha, what is this?" she cried. "We're your family." "Not anymore," I answered quietly. "You've made it clear for years that I wasn't part of this family. Now I'm just formalizing it." "This is ridiculous," she said. "We were just..." "Just what?" I asked. "Pretending I didn't exist? Erasing me? That's how you treat family?" After a pause, she whispered, "Is this about money? You're mad because we needed your help? I didn't even know you were paying for the repairs until I saw the notice." Those words chilled me. "That's exactly the problem. You never understood." And I hung up. Then came the flood of angry messages from Thomas, threatening to take me to court, calling me crazy, blaming me for our parents' financial struggles. But the most surprising response came from my father. He reached out to my lawyer and sent me a formal letter, the only method allowed under the restrictions. "Samantha," he wrote, "I watched in silence as you were pushed out of the family. My cowardice led us here. If legal action is what it takes, maybe it's what we deserve. I just want you to know I'm sorry. If I had been a better father, this might not have happened." Reading his letter, I felt a flicker of pity. But the pain was still fresh. The wounds were still deep. The restraining order remained in place. Susan handled their continued questions about finances. Eventually, they understood this wasn't a bluff. I was no longer part of their lives. And I was ready to face the consequences of their careless words and actions. But this was only the beginning. A few days after the restraining order was issued, I was finally ready to take the hardest step. That day, Susan called me. "Samantha, about your parents' cottage. It's ready. Legally, it's yours. You have the right to evict them. What would you like to do?" "Send the eviction notice," I said without hesitation. That cottage was the last thread connecting me to them. It wasn't mine originally. It had belonged to my grandparents, then it got passed to my mother. Years ago, when my parents fell behind on payments, I quietly purchased my mother's share. Legally, I owned it all. But no one in the family ever updated their assumptions. They treated it like a shared family property. Everyone used it for weekends, holidays, even whole summers. Eventually, after retirement, my parents decided to live there full-time. And I allowed it. But then, I was done. I was ready to take it back. The following Monday, I drove to the cottage with Michael Zhang, another attorney. The sheriff came with us, just in case. When we arrived, my father greeted us at the door. He looked older. His hair was nearly white. "Samantha," he said weakly, "won't you come in?" "No," I replied. "Michael, please explain." Michael cleared his throat and handed my father a formal envelope. "Mr. Anderson, this is an official notice of eviction from this property. You have 30 days to vacate and return the keys." My father stared at the paper, his hands shaking. "But this is our home." "No," I said, my voice calm though my heart pounded. "This is my property. I allowed you to use it before, but that permission has been revoked." My mother appeared behind the door. "What's going on?" "They're telling us to leave, Debbie," my father said. His voice trembled. My mother looked at me, her eyes filled with betrayal. "You're kicking us out of our home? Our retirement home?" "You've always known this was legally mine," I replied. "You've continued to take advantage of my kindness." "We have nowhere to go," she said. "You can live with Thomas," I answered. "He made it very clear a few months ago that I wasn't family." My father lowered his head. He was wrong. We all were. "It's too late," I said. "In 30 days, if you're not prepared to move out, your remaining belongings will be removed and the locks changed." "We're your parents. Why are you doing this?" Her voice was shaky with confusion. "Because as you said, I got the hint." As I turned to leave, my father grabbed my arm. "We're truly sorry, Samantha," he said, eyes welling with tears. "Can't you give us one more chance?" I gently pulled my arm away. "You had years, you had countless chances. And I'll say it again, it's too late." That day, as I left the cottage, I felt something heavy lift from my shoulders. I no longer needed their approval. I no longer needed them to define my worth. 30 days later, they left quietly. The cottage was sold. I began a new chapter. About 3 months after evicting my parents, it happened. It was a September day, touched with the first hint of autumn. I got a call from reception at my office. "Samantha, there's someone here to see you." They said their name is Anderson. My chest tightened. The restraining order was still in place, but as long as they remained in the lobby of the office building, they weren't technically violating it. I took a deep breath. "I'll be down in 5 minutes." When I got to the lobby, I saw them. My parents looked older, especially my father. His shoulders were hunched. New deep lines had carved into my mother's face. They wore cheap clothes. I noticed a hole in one of my father's shoes. "Samantha," my mother said, her voice soft and trembling. She took a step forward, but I instinctively stepped back. "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my voice as steady as I could. "The restraining order is still valid." "We know," my father said. but we needed to talk. Go through my lawyer, I said. We can't afford one, he replied. His voice was small, wounded. Samantha, we've lost everything. I looked more closely. My mother's wedding ring was gone. The heirloom watch my father had inherited from his father was missing. Had they pawned them? After we left the cottage, we rented an apartment, my father continued. But the rent was too high. Then the car broke down. We couldn't afford the repairs. My savings ran out. He trailed off. We tried staying with Thomas, my mother said. But things with him and Lucy, they're not doing well. They have problems of their own. We're living in a motel now, my father added. We can afford maybe one more week. After that, we don't know. Tears welled in my mother's eyes. Samantha, I know you'll help. You've always been a good girl. So caring. You've always looked out for us. Always forgotten, though, I said quietly. Can't we just put the past behind us? My mother pleaded. We're your parents. I looked out the large lobby window. The autumn sunlight painted the fallen leaves on the street gold. It would be so easy to go back, to help them, to hand over the money, to fix their problems again, like I used to. For a moment I felt the temptation. Their suffering tugged at my heart. But then I remembered Hillary's words. Samantha, take care of yourself. If they won't treat you like family, you have no obligation to treat them like family either. I can't help you, I said. Simple words, but they were incredibly hard to say. But, my father began. I'm not your bank, I cut him off. I'm not your parent, and just like Thomas said, I'm not your family. So I don't owe you family duties. My mother started to sob. We were wrong, I admit it. Please, just give us another chance. There are no more chances, I said. I'm done. I turned away from them and walked toward the elevator. My heart ached, but at the same time, I felt a strange sense of relief. At least let us stay one night? My father called out from behind me. I didn't answer. I pressed the elevator button. Before the doors closed, I could hear my mother crying. Tears welled in my eyes too, not from sadness, but from the relief of finally choosing to respect myself. That night, I called Aunt Hillary. My parents came to my office, I explained. They needed money, but I said no. That must have been a hard decision, she said. It was, I admitted. But I think it was the right one. It's time I start living my own life. You're absolutely right, Samantha, Hillary said. Your life belongs to you. A month later, I received a message from Lucy. I've decided to leave Thomas. I've started divorce proceedings, she wrote. After seeing how he treated you and watching how he handled things when your parents were in trouble, I finally saw who he really was. That must be so hard, I replied, surprised by the wave of sympathy I felt for her. He's changed completely. Ever since I brought up divorce, he's been spiraling. He stopped going to work. He's been drinking too much. He got fired last week. I looked out the window, torn inside. Samantha, let me say this. We were wrong about the wedding. About cutting you out. I followed Thomas, but it was a mistake. After reading her message, I sat for a long time. I didn't feel joy or satisfaction at what my brother was going through. Instead, there was a strange emptiness. He was now facing the consequences of his choices just like I had for so many years. That evening, I passed by Thomas's apartment. The windows were dark. Mail was overflowing from the box. I paused for a moment. I wondered if I should knock. Was there something I needed to say? Some help I should offer? But I kept walking. His pain wasn't mine to carry. It was time for him to learn everyone must take responsibility for their actions. As autumn turned into winter, my life found a new rhythm. Work at the digital marketing firm was going well. I was being promoted to vice president, and I had a team of my own. The time and energy I once saved for my family, I now poured into my career and passions. Aunt Hillary remained by my side. She called every Sunday, and sometimes stayed at my condo. "It's beautiful to watch your life bloom," she often said. But the past didn't disappear entirely. One morning in December, a letter arrived in the mail with a familiar handwriting. It was from my father, his fourth letter in 3 months. From the first one, I noticed a shift in tone. It had started as desperate pleading. Eventually, it carried a deeper sense of reflection. I brewed some coffee, sat by the window, and opened the envelope. They were living in a small apartment now. My father had found a part-time job at a local hardware store. My mother started working at a senior care facility, and they were continuing therapy. I rested the letter on my lap and looked outside. With each letter, his words had changed. They no longer begged for forgiveness or help. They spoke of growth, and a growing awareness of how I had been treated, and how wrong it had all been. Therapy seemed to be helping him. He was starting to understand the depth of what I'd endured. Still, I hadn't replied to any of his letters. That night, Aunt Hillary called me. "Your father phoned me yesterday. He's changing, Samantha. Truly." "I believe that," I said. "But it's still too soon for reconciliation." "Of course," she replied. "Everything has its season. Right now, this is your season. You get to decide whether they have a place in your life again." We talked for a while longer, and she promised to come over for dinner next week. After we hung up, I stood by the window again. The city lights glowed softly through the snow. Life is strange. A year ago, I would have done anything to be accepted by my family. I had tied my worth to their approval. But now, I see things differently. My value lives within me. I have learned to love, respect, and protect myself. Maybe the day will come when I reconcile with my father. Maybe with the family. But if it happens, it will be on equal terms. I will never let them define my worth again. And I will never be invisible again. You're nothing but a burden. Get out. Never in my life did I think I'd be kicked out of my parents' house on my birthday. Today is my 28th birthday. A party thrown by my parents. A day that was supposed to be joyful. I slipped into my dress and reached for the living room door. The air was cold, like needles brushing against my cheeks. But as I stepped inside, something about the house felt wrong. I wasn't expecting balloons or thoughtful gifts. Still, the living room lights were harsh, and the small group of friends and relatives gathered there wore stiff, uncomfortable smiles. My mother busied herself with the table setting, never once meeting my eyes. My father, grinning with a whiskey glass in hand, was already on his second pour. I forced a smile for the guests and slid into an empty chair. Tension rippled through the room. The party stumbled forward, heavy with awkward small talk and forced laughter. Glasses clinked too loudly. Not once did my parents say happy birthday. No warmth. Just mechanical gestures. I stared at the untouched cake sitting in the corner. Something was coming. I should have known. My father never missed a chance to be cruel in public. Halfway through the party, he raised his glass and stood, drawing everyone's attention. With a practiced grin, he motioned for my mother to bring something forward. It was a hat. "We thought our dear Catherine deserved a special crown," he announced. My heart dropped. For a brief second, time froze. My mother placed the hat on my head. It read, "Just a burden." Laughter erupted. I searched my mother's face, desperate for any sign this was just a tasteless joke. But she wouldn't meet my eyes. They had planned this. This wasn't a celebration, it was an execution. Slowly, I took off the hat. Every eye in the room was on me. They were waiting. Waiting for tears. For begging. Or for a breakdown they could use to justify their cruelty. "You're nothing but a burden." "Get out," my father said. "You're an adult now," my mother added, irritation in her voice. "You shouldn't be living here anymore. It's time to start your own life." "You're right, Mom," I replied. "You're absolutely right. But you could have just said, 'Let's leave.' Why did it have to be a public execution?" "Don't be so dramatic," my father scoffed. "You're ungrateful. After everything we've given you." "I understand," I said finally. My voice was calm. Shockingly calm. "I'll leave tonight. But you don't even realize what you're about to lose." I turned to the guests. They stared at their feet, the walls, their shoes anywhere but me. All but one. Only my boyfriend, Jack, looked at me. His eyes burned with a mix of rage and sympathy. He gave me a small nod. My father grinned, triumphant. I turned and climbed the stairs without looking back. Each step landed with finality. I go into my bedroom, and I shut the door behind me and changed out of my formal dress into jeans and a sweater. I dragged out my half-packed suitcase and began stuffing the rest of my essentials inside. Then my eyes caught the photo on the wall. Me and my parents on graduation day. Smiling. Proud. That day, my father had handed me a small envelope. Inside were mortgage papers. "A new beginning," he'd said. They had dumped the house payments entirely on me. My first paycheck had vanished trying to save it. But that was only the beginning. A few months later, he said it. "I need a little help, Catherine. Just a small debt." "How much?" I asked. $15,000, he replied. "A bit of gambling trouble." I was stunned. I'd known they were struggling, but gambling? "If I don't pay it back," he said, "some dangerous people will get involved." "I raised you. I sent you to college. I'm asking for help. Just this once. Under the weight of emotional pressure and guilt, I used my emergency savings to pay off his debt. Money I had slowly set aside through part-time jobs during college. Then came my mother's car trouble, which later turned out to be for cosmetic surgery. A sudden medical emergency that turned out to be a lie. And my father's business investment, which was really just another gambling debt. At first I believed these were just unfortunate coincidences. But over time the pattern became undeniable. They were always using my kindness. Every time I got promoted, every time I received a bonus, a new financial emergency appeared. And through it all, I kept paying their mortgage. Whenever I bought something for myself, a new outfit, a small vacation, sometimes even just lunch, they called me selfish and ungrateful. I tried setting boundaries more than once. But each time, the emotional blackmail came back. We gave up everything for you. Real family supports each other. They always knew how to press my guilt button, making me feel like I owed them something. Meeting Jack was the turning point. He saw my situation from the outside and pointed out the truth: my parents were financially exploiting me. I didn't want to believe it at first. The idea that my own parents were intentionally using me, it felt impossible. Jack encouraged me to start tracking my finances. When I did, the truth hit me hard. Over the past 5 years, most of my income had gone straight to them. "This isn't love, Catherine," Jack said gently. "This is exploitation." And slowly, I began to see everything through a new lens. I remembered that moment now, as I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. My fingers hesitated for only a second. Automatic mortgage payment canceled. I had just dismantled the financial scaffolding of their lives. I transferred the remaining funds from our joint account into my personal one. Then, a knock at the door. "Catherine?" Jack's voice. "You okay? Can I come in?" I opened a door and let him in. He took one look around the room and understood immediately. "Need help packing?" he asked simply. "Thanks," I said. "But there's still one more thing I need to do." He glanced at the screen, and a quiet understanding passed over his face. He placed a hand on my shoulder. "You have every right to do this, Catherine. What they've done to you." He shook his head. "There are no words." "I keep wondering how they'll react," I admitted. "But I know it's going to be ugly. I've already been hurt enough." "Come stay with me," Jack offered, "starting tonight. There's a guest room. Take all the time you need to figure out your next move." "Thank you," I said, sincerely. "There's nothing here worth staying for." He hugged me tightly. "You're making the right choice, Catherine. You're strong. You're brave. And more than anything, you're not alone." He picked up my suitcase, and together, we walked downstairs. The party had completely unraveled. Most of the guests were gone. My father was passed out in a chair, drunk. My mother stared blankly into her wine glass. As we walked by, she looked up, but said nothing. At the front door, I paused and took one last look inside. Memories flashed: Christmas mornings, summer barbecues in the backyard, doing homework at the kitchen table. A house that had slowly transformed from love and trust into financial manipulation. "Goodbye," I said softly, and stepped out. The sound of the door closing behind me felt like the final chapter of my old life being sealed shut. Months passed. Then, one morning, my phone buzzed violently. One glance at the screen shattered my calm. 27 missed calls. All from my parents, along with several unknown numbers. No doubt relatives or neighbors they had rallied to their side. I didn't check the voicemails right away. I just stared at the notifications, feeling that familiar stir of guilt bubble up. But I pressed it down, firmly. Lying back, I tapped the first message, my cousin Howard. Got a notice the mortgage hasn't been paid. Uncle George is smashing furniture. Aunt Susan's having some kind of dramatic meltdown. I set the phone down. I didn't respond. I wasn't rushing to solve their crisis. Not this time. A new notification. Another voicemail. Curiosity 1, and I hit play on speaker. My mother's voice trembled. Please, there's been some terrible misunderstanding. You wouldn't just abandon us like this. Call us whatever's wrong, we can talk it through. We're family. I closed my eyes for a moment and let her words dissolve into the sunlit room. It's remarkable how quickly just a burden turns into please help us when the mortgage payment doesn't show up. A text from my father. You'll regret betraying your family like this. No warmth, no confusion, just cold, threatening rage. Another vibration. A message from Aunt Linda. Did you really abandon your parents? After everything they sacrificed for your success, this is how you show gratitude. Your father's health is deteriorating rapidly. He hasn't eaten in 48 hours. The phone suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. A knot twisted in my stomach. Guilt worked with surgical precision, breaking down the defenses I had carefully built, as if it had just been waiting beneath the surface for a moment like this. I reread the message over and over. What if they truly were suffering? What if my actions had been too harsh? The guilt grew heavier throughout the day. Aunt Linda's message was just the opening volley. Calls poured in. Relatives who usually ignored my existence suddenly had urgent opinions. Do you understand how serious George's condition is? Came Aunt Wendy's sharp voice in one voicemail. Yes, families disagree, but this kind of abandonment crosses a moral line. Have you even considered your mother's fragile emotional state? Uncle Tom said in another. This stress could send her into a total breakdown. Each message cracked my resolve a little more. Maybe I was heartless. Maybe I was the villain. Maybe. Then another buzz. A text from Howard. Uncle George is losing it. Aunt Susan might need to be hospitalized if this keeps up. I stared at the screen, the realization knocking the breath from my lungs. This wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't accountability. It was strategy, just another performance. They didn't miss me. They missed my financial support. This time, I let the full weight of that truth settle. Years of one-sided sacrifice. Support never acknowledged. Endless giving, hoping someday for gratitude from people who were incapable of it. It didn't hurt anymore. What I felt was sharper, clearer, crystallized. Jack didn't say anything at first. He just handed me a mug and sat beside me. You okay? He asked. I've had enough, I told him. I can't let their lies go unchallenged anymore. He nodded. To protect your peace and your name, you need to tell the truth. I had 5 years' worth of financial documents organized in folders. Mortgage payments, utility bills, their credit card statements, and countless transfers covering George's gambling debts. As a lawyer, Jack helped me format everything into a clear, professional presentation. We built a financial timeline month by month, from the day I graduated college to the day I left their house. Every dollar I had contributed and for what purpose. The totals were staggering. On average, I had paid more than $1,500 a month for 5 years just to keep them afloat. "Are you planning to post this publicly?" Jack asked. "No," I shook my head. "I'm only sharing it with family." I sent the message carefully, individually, to relatives. There have been recent attempts to damage my reputation. I had hoped to avoid addressing them, but I now feel it's necessary to share the truth. I paid my parents' mortgage and covered many of their living expenses. I chose to help them, but recently it's become clear that the relationship has been one-sided and exploitative. On my 28th birthday, they called me nothing but a burden and demanded that I leave their home immediately. Financial records are available upon request to any family member who wishes to review them. I hold no hatred toward my parents. I truly hope they live well and peacefully, but from now on, without my involvement. I won't be commenting further on this matter. I ask for your respect and privacy." Jack nodded. "Clear, factual, not emotional. It's perfect." "This ends here," I said. "Whatever comes next, that's their burden." Within hours, the responses began. The first was from Howard. "Catherine, I'm at your parents' house. I showed your documentation to everyone." They're stunned. Especially the aunts. "No one knew you'd been supporting them like that." Then a message from Aunt Linda. "Catherine, I just had it out with your father. At first, he insisted you were lying. But when Tom showed him the records, he changed. I told him how ashamed he should feel. Can we talk?" Jack sat beside me as I read through the flood of messages. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Free," I said. For the longest time, I was afraid their version of the story would be the only one people heard. They were loud. I was quiet. Obedient. But now the truth is out. That weekend, my phone buzzed again. A new message from Uncle Tom. It was a photo. A for sale sign in front of George and Susan's house. They were now facing a new financial reality. They would have to deal with the consequences of their actions, just like I had faced the consequences of theirs. The truth was out. It was finally time to move forward. The next few days swept by in a whirlwind of rebuilding. But the day came suddenly. A professionally formatted delivery notice arrived. I looked at Jack. His brows lifted as he scanned the legal header, his expression instantly shifting into professional focus. I crossed the marble foyer and I opened the door to find a court process server waiting, an official envelope in hand. "Catherine Smith?" he asked, voice procedural. "Yes," I replied, feeling the edge of my professional composure falter. He handed me the envelope. "Service of legal notice completed. You've been served. Contact details for legal response are included inside." I acknowledged receipt calmly, shut the door gently, and examined the envelope with detached precision. Carefully, I broke the seal and slid the documents out. My father had initiated legal action against me. The claims were absurdly vindictive yet tactically crafted. Financial misconduct, elder financial abuse, neglect of a dependent caregiver, temper tantrums dressed up in legalese. Jack, sitting beside me, reviewed the documents and immediately slipped into litigation mode. This is outrageous. They're trying to weaponize the legal system because the financial exploitation stopped. Not again, I said firmly, rising with resolve. I won't apologize for defending my financial independence. That afternoon, we met with Jack's senior litigation partner. I laid out everything methodically, professionally, years of meticulously documented proof. Every transfer, every receipt, every documented contribution. They listened intently, asked precise questions, and confirmed they would prepare a powerful countersuit. Your position is exceptionally strong, Jack's managing partner assured me. Frankly, your case for countersuit is not just strong, it's undeniable, given the extent of the financial exploitation. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wanted justice. I wanted my professional reputation and financial independence restored. That same afternoon, following their legal counsel, I signed off on a formal counterclaim detailing the years of emotional coercion and systematic financial manipulation. The reaction was immediate. My mother called first, her voice finely laced with rehearsed anguish. Catherine, please. You're tearing this family apart. We've only ever tried to support your success. You're overreacting dramatically. I maintained professional silence. Then came a message from my father, his last calculated threat. You think you've won? Blood always determines the final outcome. Family isn't defined by blood, I whispered into the quiet room. It's defined by the people who recognize and respect your worth. 3 days later, I walked into federal court. With a leather portfolio containing neatly prepared legal documents, I was flanked by Jack and his firm's senior litigation partner. Inside the mediation room, my father sat unnaturally upright at the polished conference table. My mother fidgeted beside him, adjusting a designer scarf with shaky fingers. They looked smaller than I remembered. The court-appointed mediator explained professionally and clearly that by pursuing blatantly false claims, they exposed themselves to significant liability for defamation and documented financial abuse. My years of detailed records backed every word. My father's face flushed a sickly crimson. He jumped to his feet, his chair screeching harshly against the polished floor. This is prosecutorial harassment, he shouted at the mediator. She's manipulating the system against us. No one acknowledged his outburst. My mother collapsed forward in a dramatic sob, her wailing echoing unnaturally in the formal space. I remained composed. I said nothing. I needed no justification. As they stormed out, the mediator turned to me and said calmly, "Your documentation is exceptionally persuasive. Don't ever doubt your decision to protect yourself legally." As I walked out of the courthouse, with each step away from that building made the weight I had carried for years feel lighter. No more explanations, no more guilt, no more unfair apologies. 6 months passed. On a cold winter afternoon, we had an unexpected visitor. Aunt Linda, my father's sister, showed up at our condo unannounced. I invited her in. She sat, visibly tense. "Catherine, I just came from seeing your parents," she said. "They're struggling." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Financially?" "Sorry, that too, but not just that," Linda explained. George lost his job. His gambling got worse. He apparently used company funds. Their new apartment is far from comfortable. Susan started working part-time, but it's nowhere near enough to maintain the lifestyle they once had. I nodded quietly. They were finally facing the consequences of their actions. They were now realizing just how crucial my financial support had been to their way of life. And beyond that, Linda added, most of the family has distanced themselves. No one condones what they did, especially now that they know how much you actually supported them. "What are you asking of me?" I asked plainly. Linda sighed. "Nothing, Catherine. I just thought you should know." They seemed genuinely remorseful. At least Susan does. She cries every day. George, well, he has a lot of pride. He's not fully there yet, but even he's beginning to change. "Have they reached out to me?" Linda asked. "No," I said. "There's been no direct contact since the court proceedings." "They're afraid," Linda replied. "They are afraid you will reject them. The shame is overwhelming, especially now that everything is out in the open." I was silent for a moment. For years, I supported their unstable finances without thanks, without recognition. And only now, after losing what they once took for granted, did they finally understand its value. "Aunt Linda," I said carefully, "thank you for telling me. But right now I need to live my own life. I need to move forward." She nodded, her face full of understanding. "Of course, Catherine. I'm just happy to see you like this content." She looked around my new apartment. "You really built all this on your own, without anyone's help?" "I had Jack's support," I said, smiling at him. After Linda left, Jack turned to me. "Do you think you'll contact your parents?" I stood by the window, watching as winter twilight settled over the city. "I don't know yet," I admitted honestly. "If they're truly remorseful, they should be the ones to act. But I'm not happy they're suffering. That's not what I ever wanted." A few weeks later, a small envelope arrived at my office. A handwritten note from Susan. "Dear Catherine, I don't know if this will even reach you, but I felt I had to write. First and foremost, I'm sorry. There's no excuse for what we did, none. You supported our lives, paid our debts, and instead of showing you gratitude, we pushed you away. That is inexcusable. We're now living with the consequences of our choices. Only now do we really understand how different our lives would have been without your generosity. George is struggling, but he's begun to change. He started counseling for his addiction. I'm not asking for anything, no money, no reconciliation. I just want to know that I think of you and hope you're happy and living the life you deserved. And maybe, one day, if you're open to it, we could sit down and talk over a cup of coffee. With love. Your mother." I read the letter over and over. The words felt sincere, but after years of manipulation and betrayal, trust isn't easily restored. I showed the letter to Jack. He read it carefully, then said gently, "It's your call. If you want to reconnect, I'll support that. If you want to keep your distance, I'll support that too." In the end, I didn't respond. I quietly hoped they'd grow from this lesson. And at the same time, I kept learning from my own. That choosing my peace over their toxicity was not just survival. It was growth. The days that followed were quiet, filled with gentle routines at Jack's condo. Brewing coffee, reorganizing my wardrobe, walking to the gourmet market for fresh ingredients. No longer anticipating the next financial crisis. No longer feeling like my existence was a burden. It was unfamiliar but incredibly precious. Then one day Jack said, "I have a surprise." He led me on a walk along the Charles River, guiding me to a bench. "Sit here," he said, reaching into his pocket. "Catherine, since you came into my life, I've seen what true strength and grace look like. You've shown me what it means to be the best version of yourself in the worst of circumstances." When he knelt down, I gasped, "Catherine Smith, will you marry me?" Tears filled my eyes as I said, "Yes." The ring was perfect, simple, elegant, exactly what I would have chosen myself. I hadn't forgotten the pain of the past. But I had begun writing a new story, one based on love and respect. A story in which old patterns would never repeat. A story where, for the first time, I had found a family I had chosen. And in this new, healthy circle built by choice, not obligation, I had finally found home. "Your role is over. Get out of here." The moment I heard those words, my mind went blank. When I came home from work, what greeted me was an empty room. There wasn't even a trace of the days I had spent building my life there. "I'm going to live with Howell, so we need a bigger room. We're going to use your room as our bedroom." That day, just like always, I came home late after working overtime. I barely managed to drive back to the house. I thought I could finally relax, but I froze when I walked in. My room's door was half open. When I went inside, the closet, bookshelf, and bed, everything was gone. It was like any sign that I had existed there had been completely erased. My mother, watching TV in the living room, glanced at me and gave a faint smile. "I moved all your stuff out." I stood there and looked at my mother. "What do you mean?" My voice was so faint, nearly vanished, but she seemed to hear it perfectly. "I'm going to live with Howell, so we need a bigger room. We're going to use your room as our bedroom." She said it too natural, as if I had never really belonged there in the first place. I asked again, "You decided all this without asking to me at all?" "Without even looking away from the TV," she replied calmly. "Well, you don't need it anymore, right? Your role is over. Get out of here." At that moment, I felt like something cold and heavy was dropped deeply into my heart. It was the day after I had finished paying for Crystal's university tuition. How much had I sacrificed and worked myself to the bone until now? "I see." That was all I said. Without even asking where my things were, I walked toward the front door. Only my father's memorial photo remained in the hallway, and I glanced at it once. When I opened the door, the damp air and silence of the night wrapped around me. I just had to get out of that house. With that single thought, I took my first step, and my phone vibrated. The screen said Crystal. The timing was too perfect, and I hesitated for a moment. When I answered, her cheerful voice rang out. "Big sis, you won't believe what just happened." I took a deep breath and replied in a calm voice, "What is it?" "I got selected as an outstanding student, and I'm going to get a scholarship." "Isn't that amazing?" I almost cried. It was truly wonderful news. I was proud of her from the bottom of my heart. It felt like all the time and support I had given her hadn't been wasted. But more than that, there was something bitterly ironic about hearing it right now. "That's great." "Really?" I tried to sound natural, but my voice trembled a little. "Big sis? Did something happen?" Yeah, actually, I just left the house. I don't think I'm going back. What? There was silence on the other end of the line. I briefly explained the situation. The fact that my room had been given away without my consent. The fact that my mother said, "Your role is over." And the fact that I was now standing there with nowhere to go. Crystal was silent for a while. After a long pause, she finally spoke in a strained voice. "That's awful. I can't believe it. But it's okay now. I don't want to stay in that house anymore, not if it means wearing myself down. Congratulations on the scholarship. You really worked hard. Sis, I want to live with you. From now on, it's my turn to help. I don't want you to be alone." Her words nearly brought me to tears. I had always thought of her as a child who didn't understand anything, that it was only natural for her to be spoiled, and that I had to be the one to support her. But without realizing it, she had started to grow up too. I haven't contacted them yet, but I'm thinking of going to Dad's parents' place, Grandpa and Grandma's house. Wait, I barely even know them. Me too. The last time I saw them was at Dad's funeral. We haven't kept in touch at all, so I don't know what things are like now. But I think Grandpa and Grandma would take me in. At the very least, they're not like Mom. I'll go too. I want to go. Crystal's voice was full of determination. It might have been the first time I'd ever heard her speak like that. I looked up at the sky. "Then I'll come get you tomorrow. Start packing your things." "Okay, I will." Those words made my chest tighten. After hanging up the phone, I took a deep breath. The air I exhaled melted into the quiet of the night. I began to walk. Not to fulfill someone else's role, but to reclaim my own life. That night, I stayed at a nearby budget hotel. I couldn't think about anything. I just collapsed onto the bed. Luckily, I had the next day off from work. Since I couldn't sleep right away, I started to think about the past. My father passed away when I was 24. It was a heart attack. So sudden and so abrupt that I couldn't process any of it. Still, time went on and life began with just my mother, Crystal, and me. I worked as a financial analyst. My days were filled with numbers and market pressure, not easy, but the income was stable. My mother worked part-time, but her earnings were minimal and couldn't support our living expenses. She always said, "You're the only one I can rely on." Every time she said that, something inside me told me, I have to support them. If I didn't, I couldn't be a proper replacement for Dad. That's how I naturally came to shoulder the household finances, stabilize my mother's emotional state, and support Crystal through high school so she could focus on her future. Crystal is 7 years younger than me. Ever since she was little, I had been the one holding her hand. When our parents fought and she cried, I'd carry her to the nearby park and push her on the swing to calm her down. Back then, she always clung to my sleeve, calling sis, sis, and she was so adorable that taking care of her came naturally to me. At mealtimes, I taught her how to use a spoon. After baths, I dried her hair. At night, I read picture books to her and fell asleep beside her. Even when the air in the house felt tense, just seeing Crystal's smile was enough to save me. The first time I saw her with a school backpack on, my heart clenched like I was watching my own child grow up. More than a sister, I felt like a little mother, determined to protect her. Crystal was cheerful and friendly, and people naturally liked her. Mother adored her and spoiled her endlessly. Even after she entered high school, Mother kept saying, "Crystal's still young. I'll let her enjoy herself," and gave her almost everything she wanted. A smartphone, trips, concert tickets. Most of those were paid for from my income. Meanwhile, I never went on trips, owned no brand name items, and spent nearly everything for the family. Every payday, I covered Crystal's tuition and living expenses, Mother's costs, and even the house payments, and I never complained. I paid for Crystal's college expenses over 2 years, spending more than $30,000 in total. Rather than showing gratitude, Mother acted like it was simply expected. Even when I got home late at night, she was laughing in front of the TV. At home, I wasn't seen as a daughter, I was treated like a manager, someone responsible for keeping the emotions and finances in check. That's how I became connected to the family, not by love, but by duty. But I had reached my limit. Still, I didn't want Crystal to feel the loss of our father too deeply. So I had resolved to hang on at least until she graduated. Around that time, Mother started bringing a man named Howell into the house. At first, she said they were just having dinner together, but over time his visits became more frequent. Before I knew it, he was lounging around like it was his home, and he and Mother were quietly preparing to live together without my knowledge. I never liked Howell very much. He had a way of speaking that felt condescending, like he looked down on others. It always seemed like he was trying to draw us into Mother's world, and I just couldn't stand it. But Mother was completely smitten with him. Whenever he came up in conversation, her expression softened, and she'd barely listen to what I was saying. That change only made me feel more isolated. And in the end, getting kicked out of the house happened far more suddenly and easily than I had expected. While I was thinking about all of that, I must have fallen asleep. The next day, I went with Crystal to our grandparents' house. Standing at the front door, my chest tightened. It had been years since I last visited. The last time I was there, my father was still alive. It was the summer after I graduated from university we had visited together. I remembered him being genuinely happy to see his parents again, while I sat beside him, feeling a bit shy. And the next time I saw my grandparents were the day of my father's funeral. When I rang the doorbell, I heard footsteps almost immediately. The door opened, and my grandfather appeared. "Aurora?" His eyes widened, then softened into a gentle smile. "Hi, Grandpa. It's been a while. Crystal's with you too? What's going on?" Come in, it's cold out there." Grandma quickly came running from the living room and embraced us. Her warm arms made me want to cry. "It's been so long. I'm so glad you both came." We were led to the living room and served hot tea. The familiar scent of old furniture and carpet gently wrapped around us. On the wall hung an old family photo of my father in his younger days. It felt nostalgic, yet somehow distant. Our grandparents were truly happy to see us. Even before we explained everything, their eyes seemed to already understand. "You must have been through a lot. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to. But this is your home. No need to hold back." With those words, something that had been tightly wound inside me finally unraveled. "Thank you, truly thank you." Crystal also bowed her head repeatedly, her eyes full of tears. The days that followed felt almost too peaceful, like the life we'd known before had been a lie. Grandma prepared a warm breakfast every morning, and Grandpa tended to the garden, saying, "Spending time like this really calms the heart." Crystal went to university during the day, helped with housework in the evenings, and started a part-time job at a nearby cafe on weekends. Her change was visible. The sister who had been spoiled by our mother and had taken my support for granted was now stepping up to carry part of the burden herself. I was quietly surprised and a little proud. One evening, after dinner, we were chatting over tea with our grandparents when Grandma suddenly brought something up. "By the way, it's about your father's inheritance. We received an official notice, too. But your mother told us that you two had given up your share. So we were completely convinced." "Given up our share?" I raised my voice without meaning to. Crystal also set down her teacup. "We were never told anything about that. We didn't even know there was an inheritance, let alone agree to give it up." "I see, I thought so." Grandpa let out a small sigh. It seemed odd. "You both loved your father so much. I couldn't believe you wouldn't want anything from him. But we believed your mother." I immediately asked my grandparents if they still had the paperwork from that time. They pulled out a bundle of old documents from the storage room. Inside, we found a copy labeled Inheritance Waiver Agreement. It had both my name and Crystal's, alongside unfamiliar signatures. This is completely forged. We've never seen this document before. I forced the words out. Grandpa and Grandma fell silent. No one said anything for a while. Unforgivable. It was Crystal's voice, usually soft and kind, now firm with anger. She pushed everything onto you, did whatever she wanted, and now even took Dad's inheritance. That's not family. I bit my lip. Deep down, maybe a part of me had still wanted to believe in her. But this was the final blow. She had taken advantage of our father's death. I will take legal action. When I said the words, my voice sounded oddly calm and clear. She illegally took Dad's inheritance. She forged our signatures. I will bring everything to light. Our grandparents looked surprised, but they nodded firmly. If that's what Aurora wants, we'll help however we can. Crystal held my hand and said, "I'll fight with you." That night, I lay in bed in the quiet room, unable to sleep. If I listened carefully, I could hear the ticking of a clock in the distance, quietly marking the passage of time. Staring blankly at the ceiling, I reflected on my life up to now. Looking back, I had always been suppressing something, always silencing my own desires for someone else's sake. I tried to believe that swallowing my emotions and giving up what I wanted was the right thing to do, that it made me strong. But maybe I was wrong. Now, I finally realized something. It's okay to choose to stand up for myself. And making that choice isn't selfish at all. Coming to this house was truly the right decision. There are people here who support us no matter what, who give us warmth that words can't describe. And that's why I decided to act. The next morning, I woke up and immediately got moving. My first stop was a law office. I sat down in front of the female lawyer I had made an appointment with, took a deep breath, and began explaining everything. My father passed away 5 years ago. Soon after, my mother claimed that we had given up our rights to the inheritance. But neither my sister nor I ever expressed such intent. The signatures were forged. The lawyer nodded as she took notes. Then she looked up at me and asked calmly, "Do you have a copy of the documents?" I pulled the waiver copy we had found at my grandparents' house from my bag. As soon as she looked at it, her expression stiffened. The date format, the handwriting, they're all suspicious. If we send this for handwriting analysis, there's a high chance it will be ruled a forgery. I nodded silently. What you're describing could lead to both civil and criminal actions. First, we file a civil lawsuit to recover the unjustly gained assets and demand a reassessment of the inheritance. In addition, since the signatures were likely forged, we can also consider a criminal complaint for document falsification and alteration of private documents. As I listened, I noticed how calm I had become. The anger and sadness had already passed. The only thing pushing me forward now was the conviction that I couldn't let this go unanswered. Please, I want everything to come to light. To proceed, I gathered the necessary documents, a family register from that time and a copy of my father's death certificate. My grandparents also helped by checking whether there was a will. There was no official will, but they found some letters and notes my father had written while he was alive. One of them included a message: "I want my daughters to live their own lives with peace of mind." That night, I spread out the collected evidence on the living room table at my grandparents' house. Crystal sat beside me, silently looking over everything. "I never knew. I didn't realize you were carrying so much on your shoulders. I chose to do it myself. But now I want to bring it to the end. I don't want Dad's memory or our lives to be twisted by someone else anymore." Crystal's profile that night looked nothing like the little sister I used to know. She had changed from someone who needed protection into someone who wanted to take responsibility. A few days later, the lawyer contacted me to confirm the lawsuit had been filed. The complaint had been officially delivered to our mother, and the civil suit had begun. Surprisingly, we heard nothing from her. No angry calls. No crying. No apology. Just complete silence. I accepted it calmly. Now I understood clearly she had never seen us as family, only as something to control. At the time, I had taken a temporary leave from work. Honestly, I wasn't in the right mental state to focus, and this legal battle felt like a kind of reboot for my life. As I continued preparing for the lawsuit, I began to slowly reclaim myself, day by day. The scent of the morning coffee Grandpa brewed, the time spent picking tomatoes with Grandma in the garden, the countless failed dinners Crystal tried to cook. All of it felt completely different from the life I had known, one driven by obligation to survive. One night, after Grandpa and Grandma had gone to bed, I sat alone in the quiet living room and found myself gazing at a photo of my father. "Dad, was this the right thing to do?" The words I whispered dissolved gently into the room. In my head, I knew suing my mother was the right thing to do. But deep inside, there was still hesitation smoldering quietly. Was it really okay to take your own family to court? I stared at my father's kind eyes in the photo, silently asking him for an answer. "What would you have done, Dad?" Caught between what's right and what I still questioned, I simply sat there, leaning on the memory of him. Soon, the truth would be laid bare in a courtroom. But it wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about cutting ties with the past or hurting anyone. It was simply about taking back my own life. And finally, I had made it to the starting line. On the day of the trial, I took a deep breath and stepped into the courtroom. The air was cold, filled with tension, and though it was my first time in such a space, my legs didn't tremble. Beside me was my lawyer. Behind us sat my grandparents and Crystal. Knowing someone was watching over me gave me a quiet strength deep inside. A few minutes later, my mother entered the courtroom. She wore a flashy suit, but her complexion looked pale. The moment our eyes met, she quickly looked away. The proceedings moved forward steadily. The lawyer presented the forged inheritance waiver agreement we had never seen and its handwriting analysis. Then came the fact that my mother had accepted all of my father's assets alone and couldn't explain what she'd done with them. She had mishandled shared family property. The lawyer laid out these facts plainly, but with sharp precision. My mother's representative tried to defend her by saying, due to confusion within the family, the waiver had to be processed quickly, but there was no strength in his words. "Were your daughters aware of this procedure?" the judge asked. I answered clearly, "No, we weren't. Neither my sister nor I have ever seen that document. The signatures were forged. How do you feel, standing here today, regarding the inheritance?" the judge asked. I chose my words carefully, then spoke calmly. My father worked his whole life to make sure we could live with peace of mind. I don't want that intention twisted for someone else's convenience. That's all. At that moment, my mother suddenly stood up. I was doing my best too. After he died, what was I supposed to do all alone? Her voice echoed through the courtroom. But no one reacted. The judge gently asked her to sit, and she did. I closed my eyes and slowly exhaled. As a witness, Crystal took the stand. I've seen how much my sister sacrificed for our family, and I took that for granted. But I never once heard about that waiver document. Despite trembling, Crystal looked straight ahead and spoke. Toward the end of the hearing, the verdict was announced. In this case, the defendant's actions are recognized as involving unjust enrichment and document forgery. The court orders compensation for the plaintiffs and the return of the inherited property. At that moment, I felt something like the tension in my back dissolve. My mother covered her face and sat motionless, looking down. There was no one left by her side. I didn't feel like I had won. That thought never came to me. There was only a quiet sense that it was finally over. I turned to my grandparents and Crystal and gave a small nod. After the trial ended, I chose independence and began living alone. With the warmth of my grandparents' support behind me, I decided to walk on my own 2 feet. I no longer had to support my mother financially, and I was finally able to use my time and money for myself. Life was still full of things I wasn't used to, and some nights felt a little lonely. But even so, small things filled my heart, drinking tea from a cup I liked, placing a little plant in the room. I didn't have to be considerate of anyone. No one could place their burdens on me. This space was no one's but mine. It was my place. At last, I had begun to reclaim my life. And Crystal, too, was walking her own path, balancing college and part-time work. The sister who once leaned on our mother was no longer there. In her place was someone who asked about our grandparents' health at breakfast and listened when I talked about work. I returned to the office. After several months on leave, I was deeply moved when my boss and coworkers welcomed me back, just as they always had. This time, I wasn't working just to exhaust myself. Now, I was living for myself. And I was finally starting to believe that. But that didn't mean my heart was completely healed. Even after we cut ties, I heard my mother was still telling relatives things like, "My daughters betrayed me," or "they abandoned their family." To her, I had always been the daughter who was supposed to support her. The moment I stopped fulfilling that role, I became a traitor. Even so, I drew a boundary for the sake of reclaiming my life. Putting distance between myself and my mother was not a sin. If I had kept carrying everything, I would have broken. Still, sometimes I wonder, did I truly make the right choice? In the quiet of the night, guilt sometimes creeps in, asking whether I abandoned my family. There's still a version of me that once loved her. And those memories haven't completely disappeared. Family isn't just about blood. If staying together only causes pain, then walking away is also a form of protection. Those were the words my grandmother said to me, and they gave me a sense of peace. One day, a relative called. "I ran into your mother at the supermarket the other day. She looked really thin. Seems like living alone is hard on her." Apparently Howell had left her, and she had quit her job too. With no one to support her, she now lived in an old apartment, chased by debt. I felt no pity. No anger. Maybe my mother was someone who could only feel self-worth by controlling others. Maybe the reason she made me shoulder the responsibility of family was because she was terrified of standing on her own. But I would never return to that world. If I tried to save her, I'd only be used again. That was the one thing I had promised myself never to repeat. That weekend, we all gathered at my grandparents' house for dinner. During the meal, Crystal spoke up. "Hey sis, I think, after I graduate from university, I want to become a psychologist. I want to be someone who can stay close to people's hearts." I smiled. "I think that's a great idea. You'd be good at it." Crystal let out a shy little laugh, then quietly added, "I think the only reason I'm who I am now is because you were there for me." Her words filled something deep inside my heart with warmth. My decision hadn't been wrong. By cutting ties with the past, I had made room for this calm, gentle life. Here, we had something we could never have found in a life of control and sacrifice, an equal and tender bond. I picked up the framed photo of my father and spoke softly. "Dad, I finally found a place I can truly call family. Thank you. I know you were watching over us all along. This is the future I chose. A life that belongs to me alone without being exploited or sacrificed by anyone. At last, this is where it begins." My name is Esther Robinson. On my 20th birthday, my parents and my sister Sylvia, who has always been their picture-perfect golden child, gave me a gift I would never forget. It was the kind of gift that still jolts me awake at night from the shock of it. They didn't just disown me. They orchestrated a spectacle meticulously planned, with relatives and friends as witnesses to sever me from both the family and the family fortune with the precision of a seasoned surgeon wielding a scalpel. None of my academic trophies were on display. Instead, Sylvia's participation ribbons lined the shelves proudly in that vast dining room. But to understand the infamy of that birthday dinner, you'd have to go back years, no, 2 whole decades. The signs were everywhere. Now, they seem painfully obvious. But back then, I couldn't see any of it. A week before my 20th birthday, my parents called me together. "Esther, honey," my mother began with a syrupy voice coated in fake warmth. "Your 20th birthday is going to be really special. You absolutely must come home. There's a surprise waiting." "That's right, Esther," my father chimed in. "It won't just be a family celebration, we've got something important to talk to you about. Something for your future. So let's have a family dinner on Saturday. Sylvia will be there. We've invited some relatives and friends too." "Why are you making such a big deal out of it?" I asked, feeling suspicious. Do parents need a reason to celebrate their daughter's birthday? My mother laughed awkwardly. "Be there at exactly 6, and wear that dress we gave you last Christmas, Esther. The blue one." That conservative and expensive dress made me look like a high school girl pretending to be some rich man's daughter. I hated it. An unease bubbled up from my chest, but I shoved it down, forcing myself to interpret it as excitement for their so-called surprise and important talk. I foolishly believed they were going to seriously and positively discuss my future. On the morning of my birthday, I put on that wretched blue dress in my room. The fabric felt heavier than I remembered. It was as if every thread carried the weight of expectations I could never fulfill. At 5:45 p.m., I arrived at my parents' home and parked my worn-out Honda gently between Sylvia's Audi and Aunt Virginia's Mercedes. The house was buzzing with the energy of gathered relatives. Inside, the dining room table was set with the finest Wedgwood china, genuine silverware, and crystal champagne flutes catching the late afternoon light. All of it was reserved for only the most formal occasions. Something was definitely wrong. Sylvia came to me and kissed my cheek. She was wearing a dazzling red dress unlike anything I had ever seen her in, and her perfume struck sharply at my nose like an expensive engagement ring, bold, aggressive, and impossible to ignore. "Happy birthday, Esther. You'll never forget tonight," she whispered. The way she said it sent ice rushing through my veins. Guests arrived in a steady stream. Uncle Solomon and Aunt Virginia, my cousin Trevor and his new wife, the women from my mother's bridge club, and my father's golf buddies with Rolex watches and deep disdain for anything too progressive. Everyone looked at me. Not with the familiar mix of pity and mild disapproval I'd grown used to, but with something else. Something that felt like goodbye. At exactly 6:00, my mother tapped her champagne glass. The room fell instantly silent. "Thank you all for joining us for Esther's 20th birthday," she began. Her smile was flawless and terrifying. "As many of you may know, this past year has been one of clarity for our family." My father rose and joined her at the head of the table. I sat frozen in my seat. Sylvia kept touching my arm, as if afraid I might bolt. "Julianne and I have spent much time crafting our estate plans," my father announced in his boardroom voice that always made me feel small. "We've made a promise to communicate our intentions transparently with our children about their futures." My heart began to pound. We have reached a formal decision on the distribution of our estate, my mother continued. Her gray eyes locked onto mine with clinical precision. Taking into careful account their sense of responsibility, potential for financial independence, and alignment with family values, we have made our decision. Sylvia has shown exceptional maturity, my father said, turning toward my sister. Her recent engagement to Marvin is just one example. Ah, yes, he completed his MBA at Harvard and now works at Goldman Sachs. Sylvia has a very pragmatic and grounded approach to building generational wealth. He paused, letting the unspoken contrast with my penniless art student boyfriend hang in the air. Sylvia will inherit the primary residence, the Lake Champlain summer home, and 75% of our liquid assets and investment portfolio. Polite applause followed. Sylvia's face gleamed with genuine delight, not just satisfaction, but pure triumph. I felt numb, as though watching the whole scene through thick glass. As for Esther, my mother continued, her voice softening with what she likely thought passed for sympathy. We intend to establish a modest educational trust. This will enable Esther to complete her degree and, if she chooses, pursue graduate studies. This is contingent, of course, on maintaining a certain GPA, meeting regularly with our financial advisor, and discussing her academic progress. More polite applause. The remaining 25%, my father added, will be held in a secondary trust. Esther will gain access to those funds at age 30, but only if certain conditions are met. These include completing a graduate education, securing a stable career in a financially realistic field, and marrying an appropriate partner approved by our financial advisor. This arrangement, my mother concluded, raising her glass, ensures that our family's legacy will be preserved through the child best suited to uphold our standards and values. To Sylvia. To Sylvia. The room echoed, and the soft clinking of champagne glasses rang out like a bell toll my own bell. It felt like a quiet funeral chime. Relatives offered Sylvia their congratulations and gave me what they probably thought were words of encouragement. You're lucky to have parents supporting your education. You'll understand once you've matured a bit more. Then my father let out the cold, dismissive laugh he always reserved for people he considered beneath him. We expected too much, he said. We hoped you would become someone of value. This is just a formal acknowledgement of something we've known for years. At that moment, I understood completely. I wasn't their daughter. I was just a problem, a charity case. I don't know how much time passed. It felt like forever. I rose from my seat and walked to the restroom silently. In the mirror, I saw myself in that blue dress. But it wasn't the same girl anymore. It wasn't the wounded daughter. It was someone who had made up her mind. I returned to the dining room. No one else was there yet, but my parents entered soon after. My mother held out a document. Sign this, she said evenly. All the legal work is done. This is just a formality. I took the document and read it. It officially removed me from any inheritance and included clauses waiving all rights to contest. With every paragraph, I felt lighter. It was finally ending. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their love. Thank you, I said quietly. Now I see who you really are. I've wasted years begging for love that was never coming. I'm done. I took the Mont Blanc pen my father offered and signed the document. I placed the document back on the table, picked up my bag, and walked away, steadying my steps. "Where are you going?" my mother snapped. "The party's not over." Without turning around, I answered, "It is for me. It was actually over a long time ago, you just didn't say it out loud." And I left the room. There was one thing no one had managed to take from me: a quiet, unshakable dignity. At a quiet cafe 3 blocks away, reality finally hit. My hands trembled as I ordered coffee, and a dull ache began to bloom deep in my heart. My phone buzzed again and again. Message after message popped up from my family. "Stop being so dramatic. Your reaction only proves we made the right decision." So emotional, as always. "You should be grateful. You're always so selfish." Classic Esther. I was raised in a wealthy family, but my parents were conservative people who valued appearances, financial success, and social standing above all else. They viewed social contribution and creativity as troublesome distractions. My sister Sylvia was their ideal daughter, the one who bore the full weight of their expectations. 3 years older than me, she had a talent for sensing exactly what our parents wanted to hear and saying it flawlessly. From as early as I can remember, power dynamics within our family were governed by an inexplicable favoritism. My straighter report cards were met with a flat, "Oh, that's nice," while Sylvia's C- earned her praise and rewards. My academic certificates and science medals decorated the walls of my bedroom, but our parents heaped compliments on Sylvia's mediocre watercolor paintings. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" was my mother's refrain. The fracture became irreparable when I was 12. Inspired by a school project, I suggested implementing a recycling program at home. My mother snapped, "That's what the housekeeper is for." My father dismissed the idea as dangerous socialism. I'll never forget my 10th birthday, the same day I won first place at the state science fair. My parents were visibly irritated. Mom said, "Sylvia has dance rehearsal at 4. That's what matters for her future," and left the venue early. Dad warned me, "Don't get too full of yourself with this science stuff. The world doesn't reward people who think they're smarter than everyone else." That night, both my birthday and my victory were ignored in favor of a lavish party for Sylvia. Achievement, I learned early on, was not something to be celebrated, it was something to be punished for. At 15, I organized a fundraiser for underprivileged students. My father tore up the check and said, "We don't associate with people like that." In high school, I led climate action rallies and devoted myself to volunteer work. My parents genuinely asked, "Can't you find a hobby that doesn't attract such weird people?" The economic disparity was just as stark. Sylvia was given a brand new luxury car at 16. I walked or took the bus. She wore designer clothes. Mine were from clearance racks. Her allowance was generous. I worked at the library to afford basic living expenses. When I received a scholarship to a state university's architecture program, my parents were visibly disappointed I hadn't chosen a more prestigious institution. What mattered to them wasn't how my choices helped me, it was how those choices looked to others. College was the first place that taught me real independence and freedom. I double majored in architecture and environmental science, studying in defiance of my upbringing. My parents called it an unnecessary luxury and refused to help with tuition. I juggled multiple jobs and maintained near-perfect grades, but the distance between us only grew. What changed the course of my life was meeting Raul. He was majoring in graphic design, came from a working-class family, and understood my pain in a way no one else had. When I brought Raul home for Thanksgiving, we were met with blatant classism. My mother repeatedly got his last name wrong. My father didn't show the slightest interest until learning Raul's father worked in construction. After dinner, Sylvia confronted me. "Seriously, Esther? A penniless art student? Do you think Mom and Dad are going to like him once it's time to talk about inheritance?" The word inheritance was never spoken directly. But it was always in the air, a silent, invisible force that shaped the dynamic between me and my sister. To my parents, Raul was the embodiment of everything they feared I might become. Someone who valued creativity and cared about social justice. "He's going to turn you into one of those people," my mother warned. That was when I fully understood. My talents were only acknowledged if they produced what my parents considered success status, appearances, and financial return. About 6 months before my 20th birthday, things began to shift noticeably. Calls from my parents became solely about my grades. Sylvia started coming home every weekend, always emerging from Dad's study looking smug and satisfied. During a holiday visit, I overheard whispers. "She cares more about saving the world than building wealth. At least Sylvia has a sensible attitude toward money. We need to realistically consider who should manage the family legacy." 1 month before my birthday, I broke up with Raul. I was almost relieved by how sympathetic my parents acted. "College relationships rarely last," my mother said gently. "Once you're more settled in society, you'll find someone more suitable." Suitable? That word echoed the quiet anxiety that had always lived deep in my chest. Memories began to surge, one after another, and my hand trembled as I held my coffee cup. The first cup had long gone cold. I ordered a second. By the time I finished it, the ringing of incoming calls had stopped, but the flood of messages on my screen reminded me just how ruthless they could be. Yet, by the third cup of coffee, the shock and numbness began to shift. It wasn't despair. It was a sharp resolve, cold, strategic clarity. The most powerful weapon my family had ever used against me, granting and withholding their approval, no longer had any hold. My parents believed they were in complete control. But I knew better. During a break from college, I had stumbled upon financial documents revealing that my parents were still dependent on monthly transfers from my grandfather, Alfred. I'd also overheard conversations about transactions that, if exposed, could seriously damage the family's reputation. Most importantly, I had kept in direct contact with my grandfather without going through them. That trust between us remained intact and undisturbed. With a steadier hand than I expected, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to my grandfather, Alfred. I told him, in detail, everything that had happened on my birthday night. "They did that to you?" His voice, usually calm and composed, was trembling with fury. "That's enough, Esther. Come to my office at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Bring all the documents. I will stop their monthly allowance immediately. They won't get away with this any longer." The next call I made was to Santos, the family's legal advisor and the same man who had privately warned me 2 years ago about my parents' reckless financial management. "I can't say I'm surprised," he replied in a calm voice. "Your parents' decisions have been increasingly erratic lately. In fact, I've noticed some signs of misconduct. This situation might be the perfect opportunity to bring them into the open." Alfred, my grandfather, was a man who had built generational wealth through discipline and effort. He had strong convictions and never tolerated easy compromise. When I arrived at his office, he was already in the middle of a meeting with his financial analyst and personal attorney. "Show me everything," he said without hesitation. I spent 2 hours laying out each piece of the evidence I had gathered. His expression gradually darkened, and a quiet anger began to rise. "This isn't just a lapse in judgment," he said firmly. "This is organized abuse masquerading as parental responsibility." My grandfather admitted that my parents were financially dependent on him. "I've been supporting them for 30 years. The house, the cars, the vacations, even Sylvia's tuition, everything has been covered by my monthly transfers. And yet, they haven't saved a single cent responsibly." Then and there, he made 3 decisive calls. First, he contacted the bank to immediately freeze all financial support to my parents and Sylvia. Next, he instructed his attorney, who was present, to begin a full revision of his estate plans. Finally, he phoned the property management company to terminate the lease on the downtown office space my parents had been using. "They need to understand that actions have consequences," he said firmly. "Financial support is a responsibility, not an entitlement." After that, my grandfather revealed how my parents had systematically sabotaged my relationship with him using false information. "They were threatened by your talent," he said, his voice now gentler. "You remind me of myself when I was young. Sharp, decisive, analytical. They knew you would earn my respect naturally. And that's something they could never attain." Hearing those words for the first time, I felt what it was like to be truly supported by someone. Then, my grandfather laid out a path to financial independence. "I'll cover all your education costs. But everything else you will build yourself, on your own terms. That's what a real inheritance means. It's not about receiving wealth. It's about being given the chance to create something valuable within your own life." Within a few hours, messages from my parents began to flood in. The sudden wave of panic in their words showed just how immediate the impact of those decisions had been. The world my parents had so carefully built began to crumble with a loud crash. The beach house was sold far below market value. The luxury cars disappeared. They even gave up their club memberships. About 3 months after my birthday, I got a call from Sylvia. She was screaming hysterically, her voice accusatory. "You ruined us? I don't know what you told Grandpa, but we're about to lose everything. Creditors call us every day. We sold the jewelry, the artwork, there's nothing left." She was desperate. "Please talk to Grandpa. He'll listen to you." I stayed silent for a moment, then quietly asked, "And where were you when I spent 20 years just wanting to be loved?" That was all I said before I hung up. 5 months after my birthday, my parents finally attempted reconciliation. One day, my father came to my studio, looking exhausted. "Maybe we made a hasty decision about the inheritance," he said. I replied in a calm voice, "That was your choice, not mine. An apology won't change the past, and I'm not looking back." He had no response. He turned and walked away with slumped shoulders. My mother also showed up at my apartment. Her voice was heavy with emotion. "I'm still your mother." I cut her off. "You never did anything for me. You lived off Grandpa's money. What you truly gave up was integrity." When I asked why she had rejected me so harshly, she murmured, barely audible, "You reminded me too much of him. You were independent, smart. You made me feel powerless. Sylvia needed me. You never did." Her confession only confirmed what I had always suspected. While she stood frozen, I opened the door and said one last thing. "By the way, I adopted a dog from the shelter you voted to shut down last year. His name is Rocky." Then I quietly closed the door. A few weeks later, I received a direct call from Santos, the attorney. "There's something I need to inform you of," he began cautiously. "While assisting with Alfred's estate, I uncovered something deeply concerning." His words left me speechless. It turned out that my late grandmother had set up a special trust for her grandchildren's education. The trust included explicit instructions to prioritize fields like architecture and engineering. It was exactly my area of study. They were funds meant to support my future. But my parents had deliberately kept its existence from me. Worse, they had diverted portions of it to fund Sylvia's so-called educational experiences. For example, labeling a fashion tour across Europe as art education. The documentation was cleverly constructed. "You've been wrongfully denied access to education funds that were meant for you," Santos explained softly. "Your grandfather had no idea until I brought it to his attention." When Grandpa received the report, he was furious. He immediately instructed Santos to pursue full recovery of the funds misappropriated by my parents and to begin legal procedures that would grant me direct and sole access to the remaining assets of the trust. Of course, the financial matter was important. But what mattered even more to me was that, for the first time, there was documented proof that my parents' years of obstruction hadn't been accidental or misunderstood, but deliberate, calculated suppression. I thought I would go mad in rage, but instead, I was filled with a profound sense of calm. This discovery erased the lingering doubt that maybe I had just been too sensitive all along. Their behavior wasn't random cruelty. It had always been a strategy to keep me down. And I realized how utterly pointless it had been to blame myself all those years. I had never been wrong. I had never deserved the pain. One day, I was sitting on the balcony of my apartment. A cold wind brushed against my face when a message arrived from an unknown number. "I'm sleeping in my car now. Please, Esther." It was from Sylvia. Without hesitation, I blocked the number. It wasn't out of cruelty. It was a boundary. They were now facing the consequences of their own choices: the years of selfishness, the stolen trust funds, and the collapse of their public image. They had brought it all upon themselves. I focused on architecture. Eco-conscious housing design was beginning to gain attention. By then, I had also begun living with Rocky. He was a three-legged rescue dog I had adopted from the shelter my mother had voted to shut down. The courage with which he lived inspired me constantly. His ability to embrace the present without clinging to the past showed me that no matter how wounded we are, we can move forward. Rocky didn't teach me through words but through his very presence. My bond with Grandpa deepened. We had become a real family, one where we genuinely cherished each other. Then one day, at a fundraiser for the animal shelter, I saw Raoul again. He, too, had moved forward. Our reconnection through shared work quietly grew into trust and warmth, and we began to talk about building affordable eco-homes together. I graduated from my master's program at the top of my class. The trust, now fully under my control, not only covered my graduate tuition, but also provided scholarships for other students. What had once been a financial wound became a gift to the community. A housing project I had designed had entered the construction phase, on its way to becoming a place where people could truly live. Watching the blueprints turn into reality gave me a sense of accomplishment no monetary inheritance ever could. There are no family photos in my apartment. When visitors ask why, I just smile and say, families are complicated. The moment they cut me off from their inheritance, I gained my freedom. Being financially disowned awakened the true legacy within me: resilience, integrity, and the power to create. Tonight, as I review my thesis and watch Rocky sleeping quietly at my feet, I think to myself, when they rejected me, they gave me the chance to choose myself. Betrayal doesn't just happen suddenly one day. In my case, it happened on the night of my birthday, wrapped in my parents' forced smiles. I'm Maria, a web developer. For the past 10 years, I've been paying off the mortgage of my family home that I was promised to inherit in the future. That house was filled with childhood memories and was a cherished place where I dreamed of living with my own family one day. "Would you like some more wine?" my mother asked. Her smile felt unnatural, and I had a bad feeling. The kitchen smelled of her signature pot roast, but anxiety filled my heart. "So, what's this important news?" I asked, trying to stay calm. My father cleared his throat awkwardly and said vaguely, "We were thinking of helping someone in the family who's in trouble." They had been evasive about the future of the house, and I had a sinking feeling. "We sold the house to Judith," my mother said flatly after sipping her wine. "He's going through a tough divorce. Families are supposed to help each other, right?" I froze with the fork still in hand. The food lost all flavor, and a deep distrust surged within me. "What do you mean you sold the house to Judith?" I managed to speak, though my mind went blank. "The house I've been paying the mortgage off for 10 years? The one you promised to leave to me when I became an adult?" My mother brushed off my words. "Don't make a fuss. You're successful in your career, aren't you? He needs a fresh start. He apparently has great plans for the house." Trying to suppress my anger, I asked, "For how much?" My father hesitantly spoke up. 50 cents, Maria. Just a token, since we're family." 50 cents. It felt like all my efforts to protect that house over the past 10 years had been reduced to nothing. I quietly put down my fork. My 10 years and my future, all for just 50 cents. "So, when were you planning to let me in on this family arrangement?" My mother sighed. "You're so ungrateful. You're always like this. Helping Judith is a family duty." I was speechless at her hypocrisy. Amid my rage and despair, a thought came to me. The only private road leading to the house. Years ago, suspecting my parents' behavior, I had bought that land just in case. The deed was in a safe, and they didn't know it existed. "When does he plan to start these grand plans at the house?" I asked, suppressing my emotions. "He's already so excited. My mother replied cheerfully, unaware of my cold tone. He's going to cut down the garden trees to make a parking lot and renovate the house into an Airbnb. Such amazing entrepreneurial spirit. My father added joyfully, "How about calling it Judith's Haven?" I forced a smile. Yes, that sounds lovely. Their betrayal and favoritism made me sick. I knew you'd understand, my mother said proudly. You're reasonable, after all. And you can always buy another house, right? A reasonable person, someone they could conveniently use without complaints to clean up their messes. Of course I understand. Families are supposed to help each other, right? Relieved by my words, my parents began talking about how Judith would announce his plans at the weekend barbecue. I nodded absent-mindedly, while in my head I was already thinking about the deed in the safe and the legal means to overturn this situation. Of course I'll come. Families are supposed to help each other, after all, I said, accepting my mother's hypocritical hug. My father tried to act sincere, saying, "I love you." I simply replied, "Yes, I know." As I collapsed onto my sofa back at the apartment, a message from my mother arrived. This was for Judith. "If you keep making a fuss, you'll be disowned." Her cold words ignited a quiet fury in me. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a declaration of war. Saturday brought a picture-perfect sunny day. "Maria, I've been waiting to see you." He monopolized the grill, spatula in one hand and a beer in the other. He looked every bit the man who had gotten a house for 50 cents. That smug face fueled my rage. "Judith," I nodded curtly and placed a bowl of potato salad on the table. "How are you doing?" I asked perfunctorily. "Fantastic," he exclaimed, gesturing grandly with his beer. Some spilled onto the grass, but he didn't seem to care. He pointed at the house that should have been mine. "Have you seen my new place? Mom and Dad told you, right? Best deal ever. I'm seriously lucky." His confidence, born from a pampered life where he never earned anything, made my blood boil. "Yes, I heard," I replied flatly. "Come check it out. I'll show you what I've got planned. I'm turning it into a luxury Airbnb. Rich folks pay big for that kind of stuff." He spoke with beer-tinged, charcoal-laced breath. "When I make it big, I'll be rich, sis." His greedy eyes disgusted me. "That's ambitious," I said. "How exactly do you plan to get in?" I asked calmly. He vaguely pointed toward the private road. "Yeah, the usual path." "No problem," he replied casually. His indifference was astonishing. "Interesting," I murmured. My sister, Michaela, called out, "I'm glad you came. Can you help me get ice from the garage?" She looked concerned. "You okay? You look like you're about to murder someone with a spatula." "I'm fine. Just enjoying how family justice plays out," I added. "I heard about the house from Mom. It's awful," she said. Her words brought me a sliver of comfort. "Yeah, but what you do always comes back at you," I replied. Back outside, our mother was showing Airbnb sketches to relatives, bragging. "Look at this design and patio layout. Isn't it brilliant?" she squealed. "Hey," Judith called from the grill. "Maria, you're good with numbers, right? A web genius. Help me with this business plan. We're family, right?" A few relatives chuckled. They were all waiting for me to swallow my pride and support Judith again. "Sorry, Judith. I'm swamped with my own projects right now, I declined. Come on, Maria. Families help each other, right? That's what Mom always says, he said, boldly throwing their justification back at me. Exactly, Judith. Families help each other, I replied coldly. The afternoon passed in a blur of fake smiles and meaningless chatter. I played my part, listening to Judith's overconfident dreams, watching my parents beam proudly at his so-called generosity. Their hypocrisy was suffocating. You've been awfully quiet, Maria, my father said while helping put away chairs. Something wrong? Just a little tired, Dad. Work was tough this week, I answered in a restrained voice. You're overworking yourself. You should be more like Judith. He's enjoying life. That unfair comparison was the last straw. As I placed the final chair, I said with pointed sarcasm, yes, getting everything without effort really is wonderful. My father started to reply, but I cut him off. I have to go. I have an early meeting tomorrow. I quickly said my goodbyes, dodged Judith's invitation, and finally escaped into my car. As soon as I started driving, I pulled over to the side of the road and called my lawyer, Ben. How was the family gathering? He asked. The worst, I replied. After the barbecue, Judith sent me a DM. Hiring a lawyer is just a waste of money, he said. I spoke while gazing at the sunset sky. He was bragging about turning the house I paid the mortgage for 10 years into a resort. Anger surged through me. Planning a resort without checking access rights? Bold. Especially after taking a jab at your lawyer, he laughed. Yeah, he's always been cocky. But this is a new level, I said, slamming the steering wheel. I can't take it anymore. Ben, it's time to end this farce. Are you sure? Once I send that letter, there's no going back. Your family's going to explode. His tone turned serious. 10 years of mortgage payments, Judith's smug face, and my mother's words selling my future for 50 cents all flashed through my mind. Did they really think they could steal what's mine and I'd just sit back quietly? They're out of their minds, I said firmly. Send the letter. Let them know who they're dealing with. Got it, boss, he replied, clearly pleased. I'll draft the documents tonight. Want it full of legal jargon and plenty of intimidating language? Make it burn with righteous fury, I said. On the way home, I thought about Judith's ridiculous dream and the private access road I owned. That 50-cent deal was about to cause a massive problem. Imagining the look on my brother's face when he learned the truth lightened my mood. Sometimes wrongdoing doesn't face consequences unless someone sets the chain in motion. This time, the catalyst was going to be a sharply worded legal document. The next morning, I visited Ben's law office. Perfect, Ben. I especially love the part about the potential trespassing charge. Quoting the relevant legal statutes was really helpful. Ben grinned. This is the most effective way to say, this is how Maria does things, right? After I signed the letter, he sealed it in an express delivery envelope. Once this bomb arrives, your phone's going to be ringing off the hook. I'm already prepared for the incoming fire, I said, holding up my phone to show it was on Do Not Disturb mode. I'm ignoring everyone except you and my boss. The letter would arrive by the next morning. Meanwhile, Judith's obnoxious Facebook post appeared in my feed, gleefully shared by our relatives. Had an amazing meeting with the architect. Judith's haven is becoming a reality. #blessed. The photos showed Judith pointing at trees on my land, standing pompously with blueprints, and awkwardly posing with contractors. Mother commented, "So proud of you, my sweet son." The hypocrisy was unbelievable. Melissa texted, "Saw Judith's post. Are you okay?" "Never better," I replied. "Just watch." During the next morning's budget meeting, my phone flashed Judith's name again and again. "Maria, is something going on?" My boss asked, concerned. "Just a little family dispute." "Nothing urgent," I replied calmly. By lunch, I had 17 missed calls and 32 texts. From Judith, "Hey Maria, I got this letter that sounds kind of like a threat. Is this a mistake? Something about the road and trespassing? Call me ASAP." From Mother, "Maria, who do you think you are? Call me right now. You're tearing this family apart." I forwarded everything to Ben. His reply was amusing. "Yikes, sounds intense. But things are getting interesting." The office phone rang. "Ms. Maria, an urgent call from your mother. Please tell her I'm preparing for a presentation and can't come to the phone." 5 minutes later, again. "This time it's your father. He says it's also urgent." I worked late that evening, and when I returned home, Melissa was sitting on my front porch holding a bottle of wine. "Quite a day, huh?" she said as I approached. "How long have you been waiting?" "About an hour. I figured you were avoiding everyone." She raised the bottle. "Thought you might need this." I let her inside. "Judith is in total panic mode," Melissa said. "He already paid the architect and even gave a deposit to the contractors." "Typical of his sloppy planning and arrogance," I said, sipping the wine. It tasted like victory. "Mom and Dad are crying that you're being cruel and ruining your brother's life." Funny, isn't it? Exercising my legal rights is cruel, while stealing my property is helping family. "That access road, is it really yours? Legally?" I handed her the deed. She looked stunned. "You actually bought it 3 years ago? In cash?" I'm practical, especially when things start to smell fishy. She handed back the deed. "You knew what they were going to do?" I had a feeling. They kept dodging the topic of transferring the house. "Even though you were the one paying the mortgage and taxes." My phone buzzed again. Judith. Melissa glanced at the screen. "That's at least his 6th call today. All about lawyers and how unfair this is." "He should absolutely consult a lawyer," I said calmly. "They'll tell him the same thing Ben's letter did. He has no legal right to use that road without my permission." "You're not going to give him permission, are you?" "I might consider it," I said with a predatory smile. "Of course, if he's willing to pay the appropriate price." Her eyes widened. "You really are going to make him pay, aren't you? Families help each other, right?" I said with icy amusement. "I'm just educating him on property law and the consequences of his actions." She laughed. "You're kind of evil." "No, just practical. I'm done being the family doormat." A text from Ben arrived. "Your mom called the office screaming something about adverse possession or some nonsense." I explained the statutes calmly. She might have cried. #lawyer life. "They're not going to give up easily," Melissa warned. "They have no choice," I replied, pouring more wine. This time, the law is on my side. And I'm not backing down. What's your endgame? I thought of the 10 years of ignored dreams, betrayal disguised as family duty, and Judith's smug face at the barbecue. Justice, I said with quiet certainty. Pure justice. At current market value, of course. On Saturday morning, I agreed to meet them at my home. Mother, father, and Judith arrived with stern faces. It was time to confront them with reality. Before we begin, let me say this. I started calmly as they sat down on the living room couch. If legal clarification is needed, Ben is on standby to join us via conference call. You don't need a lawyer. Stop this nonsense right now, Mother exclaimed. Judith leaned forward, as overly familiar as ever. Come on, Maria. We're family. We can talk this out. Judith, if you say family helps each other one more time, I'll call Ben immediately. There is no room for debate. I cut him off coldly. Father cleared his throat. Maria, I know you're upset about the house. No, Dad, you really don't understand, I said, placing a file on the table. Let's focus on the present. Judith, you bought land with no legal access rights. The only access road is mine. That's a family road. Mother snapped, her face turning red. No, it's not, I replied, showing them the deed. I bought it 3 years ago. It's a completely independent property. Judith snatched the document and skimmed it desperately. This can't be real. The realtor never sold you road access. What Mom and Dad sold you was a cul-de-sac lot. He slammed the deed down. So, what do you want, Maria? He demanded angrily. Money? A cold smile curled on my lips. Now you're starting to understand, Judith. I'll sell you an easement. How much? Father asked quietly. $75,000. Mother gasped, her coffee cup clinking. Judith stood, his face twisted in rage. This is insane. It's just a gravel path. It's the only legal access to the land you plan to develop into an Airbnb, I said calmly. Without it, your land is useless. You're trying to ruin me, he accused. No, I'm charging fair market value? Isn't that what entrepreneurs do? Mother began to cry. I can't believe you do this to your own family. I opened another file. Let's talk about what family does. Like this text from Dad promising me the house. This email from Mom acknowledging my loan payments. And this notarized affidavit about verbal agreements and possible fraud. The room fell silent. You saved all of that? Father whispered, pale. I'm practical. I keep records. Judith paced the room. This is blackmail. No, it's business. If you want to build a resort, you need access. I'm offering to sell it. I can't afford that, he cried, collapsing onto the sofa. Then Judith's haven remains a dream. Mother stood with trembling hands. You've changed, Maria. You've become cold and calculating. I learned from the best. I watched you manipulate situations, play favorites, and dismiss my dreams as trivial for years. That's not fair, Maria, Father said weakly. Not fair? I let out a dry laugh. You sold the house I paid the mortgage for 10 years for 50 cents? You promised something you never intended to give? Judith stared at the floor. I can't let this opportunity slip. I've already sunk a fortune into it. That's your problem, I said, gathering the documents. My offer stands. Permanent road access for $75,000. Take it or leave it. I'll sue you, Mother shrieked. Go ahead. Then we'll be thrilled to question everyone involved in the improper sale of the house. Father slowly rose. Maria, please. We're your parents. Yes, you are. And you've taught me everything I need to know about family loyalty and betrayal. They slammed the door behind them, leaving in tears and bitter words. Through the window, I could see them gesturing furiously in the driveway. My phone rang. It was him. How did it go? Ben texted. You crushed it. I'm proud of you. The phone buzzed again. Melissa this time. Judith's been whining to me. He's panicking over the $75,000. Says you've ruined everything. I thought of my 10 years of dreams, ignored hopes, and plans wrecked by their favoritism. What goes around comes around, I replied to Melissa. Early Tuesday morning, a notification from the security camera went off. The live feed showed Judith's truck driving down my gravel road toward his property. Bingo. I immediately contacted Ben. Got him. Unauthorized use of my road. Perfect timestamp too. He replied instantly. Brilliant. I'll file for an injunction today. Send me the footage. I had installed the camera the day after the family meeting. Knowing Judith, I figured he would ignore any legal warning. Sure enough, within 3 days, I had the evidence. My phone rang. It was Mother. Before you say anything, I said calmly, I have video proof of Judith trespassing on my private property this morning. He was just trying to check on his land. She screamed hysterically. By going through my private road, after receiving a legal notice. That's the issue. Everyone in the family is talking about how cruel you are. Aunt Linda called crying, saying you're destroying Judith's future. It was their usual attempt to guilt-trip me, but it didn't work anymore. Really? Because when you and Dad gave away my inheritance for 50 cents, no one cried about my future, I replied coldly. She went silent and hung up. 10 minutes later, Melissa called. Mom just messaged me about your reign of terror. What's it like to be at the eye of the hurricane? You know what kind of people they are, I said, sending her the camera footage. She watched in silence for a moment. Is that Judith sneaking down your road at dawn? Yes, with a trailer, no less. Probably filled with construction materials he can't afford. Unbelievable, she sighed. You know they're spreading lies about you at the family dinner, right? They've made you the total villain. Well then, good thing I wasn't expecting an invite to that charming little gathering, I said bitterly. That afternoon, I drove out to the property. Sure enough, Judith's truck was parked there, and he was hammering wooden stakes near the boundary of my land. Those stakes aren't crossing onto my road, are they, Judith? I called out sharply. He nearly dropped his hammer in surprise. They're boundary markers for my land, he shouted back angrily. The stake had Judith's haven, opening soon, scrawled on it in his handwriting. Actually, Judith, I said, pointing beyond the stake, your land is over there. This is my road. You think you can stop what I'm doing? he sneered, gesturing toward the woods. This Airbnb is happening. I've got investors. I took out my car key and approached the stake. But Judith, your progress can be undone, I said, scraping his name off the sign with the key. Real mature, he said sarcastically. And you're a grown man sneaking around at dawn after receiving legal notice. I shot back. His face turned bright red. My investors are waiting. Are you trying to ruin my life? Actions have consequences, don't they? I shrugged. No, you're just bitter and jealous. Choose your next words carefully, Judith. I cut him off coldly. Ben filed for an injunction this morning over your trespassing, with video evidence. He turned pale. You saw that? With security cameras? Welcome to the 21st century. I started walking back to my car, and he rushed up to the window. Wait, Maria. Let's negotiate. $75,000. Non-negotiable, I said firmly. That's robbery, he stammered. No, Judith, I replied, meeting his desperate gaze. Robbery is stealing someone's future and selling it for 50 cents. I drove away, leaving him behind. Later, I got a text from Melissa. Judith's telling everyone in the family that you destroyed his boundary marker and threatened him. Mom's freaking out. Good thing I captured both his behavior and my destruction on the dash cam, I replied. Melissa sent a shocked face emoji. You're always prepared, sis. I learned from watching them, I replied. When I got home, a poorly written legal threat letter was in my mailbox, apparently from a lawyer Judith had hired. I forwarded it to Ben. He replied with a crying, laughing emoji. Should I send him the Bar Association's ethics code? Save it for court, I replied. That evening, I walked along the gravel road. A family of deer crossed in front of me. A text came from Dad. This family is falling apart. Please reconsider. I thought of all those years of family dinners, their cruelty, and the decade of patience I had endured. The family has been broken for a long time, Dad, I replied. Everyone's just been pretending not to see it. I turned off my phone and kept walking. The sun was setting, and Judith's boundary marker glowed defiantly in the twilight. The following week during lunch break, Melissa burst into my office. Maria, look at this, she said in a trembling voice, handing me a newspaper clipping. Today's classified ads. The ad read, Luxury Judith's Haven Hideaway. Now accepting early reservations, and listed my brother's company name and phone number. He's taking bookings and collecting money without legal access rights. This had gone beyond a family dispute. Just then, a text from Ben arrived. Check Channel 5's news site. Now. I opened the webpage, and the headline made my blood boil. Local visionary developer promises eco-resort revolution. And there he was, the con artist himself, Judith, standing on the back deck of our parents' house, pointing toward my forest. Construction is scheduled to begin next month, he declared confidently. Minor details? I shouted, grabbing my phone. Ben, you're seeing this nonsense too, right? He replied, already on it. Check your email. I sent you his company registration documents. The documents showed that Judith had listed my private road as the sole access point for his company, without any permission. This is blatant fraud, Melissa said, furious. Yes, and now we have definitive proof that he planned it all knowingly, I said. The office phone rang. Ms. Maria, your mother is here. Send her in. Are you sure you want to see her alone? Melissa asked nervously. I'll be fine, but keep your phone on. Things are about to get very interesting. Mother stormed into the office, fuming. Are you satisfied now, Maria? She shouted. The whole town is saying you're obstructing community progress. Sit down, Mother, I said quietly. We need to talk about Judith's business. She turned pale. The criminal act he's committing right now, using my land as collateral for a scam. That's a private family matter, she stammered. So is theft, Mother, I said icily. And so is fraud. Destroying someone's future for personal gain is a crime too. He's family, she cried. And so am I snapped, slamming a stack of documents onto my desk. Something you conveniently forgot, especially when you sold my house to him for 50 cents, probably to cover his gambling debts. She sank into a chair. How do you know about his gambling? She whispered. I didn't, until just now, I replied with a grim smile. But thanks for the confirmation. Another text from Ben came in. Judith has already collected large deposits from 12 people for a non-existent Airbnb. Mother, he's taking money, I said with zero sympathy. For a resort on land he legally can't access. That's criminal fraud. You're going to send your own brother to prison? She cried. No, Mother. His reckless choices and criminal behavior will send him to prison. I'm just refusing to be an accomplice. Call Dad and Judith. We're meeting tonight at my house at 7. Ben will be there. You don't need a lawyer for family matters, she pleaded. The moment you and Dad decided to steal from me and deceive others, a lawyer became absolutely necessary, I said, standing. After she left, I called Ben. Did you find anything else? Oh, you're going to love this, he said gleefully. His company registration includes plans for a restaurant. Naturally, he's also listed your private road as the only access point for health and liquor license filings. Guess how many of those permits he actually has? A cold satisfaction crept over me. 0, obviously. So tonight we drop the legal hammer? I thought of the 12 innocent people he defrauded, my own 10 years of patience, planning, and betrayal. Bring everything you've got, Ben, I said firmly. Let's finish this. I looked up at the autumn sky through the office window. Ben was the first to arrive. Ready? Absolutely, I said, adjusting the water pitcher. Legally, how bad is it for him? Let's just say your revenge will look merciful by comparison. The door opened, and my parents walked in with a scowling Judith. No one attempted to sit. This meeting is being recorded, Ben said. Of course it is, Mother muttered. Let's begin with the fraud, he said, laying out documents. Mr. Judith, you collected deposits for a property with no legal access. That constitutes fraud. I was going to figure something out, Judith protested. With whose money? I asked. Money you took from innocent people to pay off your gambling debts? Father looked up. Gambling? Judith turned crimson. That's private. Nothing is private anymore, Ben said. Casino records, online betting accounts, your company's misrepresentation? Can you guess how many years in prison this adds up to? We have witness statements too. You're bluffing, Judith growled. Here's the deal, I said. You have two choices. First, I press charges for fraud and embezzlement. You go to jail. The 12 customers you con testify. The media runs every detail, and you're socially ruined. The second option? Father asked, barely managing the words. You transfer the deed to the house back to me. I buy it for 50 cents. Then I grant temporary access to remove your things. And every cent you took in deposits is returned to your victims. Fail to do that, and I file charges immediately. This is blackmail, Judith shouted. No, Ben corrected. This is mercy. Option 1 would destroy your entire reputation. You can't prove any of this. Oh, but I can, I interrupted. Want to see the documents? Bank records? Security camera footage of trespassing? Forged company papers? We have it all. Mother started crying again. Maria, please. He made mistakes, but... But what? He's family? That excuse doesn't work anymore. Father cleared his throat. We thought you'd do the right thing. I am doing the right thing. I'm stopping him from destroying more lives. I turned to Judith. Sign or fall, your choice. This isn't fair, he muttered. Fair? I laughed. Was it fair when you stole my house? When you took money from innocent people? Ben slid the transfer documents across the table. Sign and initial here. With a trembling hand, Judith picked up the pen. You ruined everything. No, Judith. You did that all by yourself. The signatures came quickly. Ben notarized the papers. Judith looked pale, and our parents hung their heads low. Their faces were marked with the fear of public disgrace. They left in defeat. Through the window, I saw Judith slam the steering wheel before starting his car. He carried the full weight of legal consequences and social ruin on his back. Well then, Ben said as he gathered the documents. I think that's a wrap. Drink? Absolutely. Ben poured the wine. To justice. To consequences I corrected. And to reclaiming my own path. Outside, gravel crunched beneath retreating tires. Inside, I felt the 10-year weight finally lift from my shoulders. Now, I just wanted to savor the freedom. I walked the border of my hard-earned land, autumn leaves crunching underneath. Ben was beside me. This would be the perfect spot for a cabin, Maria, he said. In this sunny clearing, it would catch the sunrise perfectly. The architect will love it too, he added. And how are things with your family? Complicated, I sighed. There are wounds that won't heal, and I'm watching them reap what they sowed. Just then, a message from Melissa came in. Things are bad for Judith. That TV spot backfired hard. His fraud blew up on social media. Mom's locked herself inside, too ashamed after trashing your name for so long. Dad regrets backing him. Says he can't even look you in the eye. I smiled faintly and sent back a photo of the clearing. Construction begins next week. No need to tell Dad anything. I had no plans to forgive him. Permits were approved yesterday, I told her. We start with the construction next week. Just one modest cabin for now, maybe a guest house later. Ben smiled. It's really going to be your place. We double-checked the property lines. I was free from the past, building a future on my own terms. Melissa texted again. I'm taking time off to see the construction site. Bringing lots of good wine. Their problems were theirs. I was finally celebrating my life.